Adrian Volkov ruled the underworld with absolute power, until the night he walked into a gala with another woman on his arm and discovered his invisible wife commanding the room he thought he owned. For 3 years, Alara had been a shadow in his mansion, a name on documents, nothing more. But when every powerful figure in that ballroom whispered her name with fear and respect, Adrian realized the most dangerous mistake a king can make, underestimating the queen he never bothered to see. Stay until the end to see how this story unfolds. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Buschen, the rain hammered against the windows of the Volkov mansion like bullets, relentless, angry, unforgiving. Adrian Volkov stood in his study, fastening platinum cufflinks that cost more than most people earned in a year, his reflection sharp in the mirror. Dark suit, darker reputation. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice because his silence carried more weight than other men's threats. Tonight was the Continental Gala, the event where billionaires pretended to be philanthropists and politicians wore their corruption like designer labels. Adrian had attended for 7 consecutive years, always with a different woman, always making sure everyone knew exactly who controlled the room. This year, it was Svetlana Kozlov, Russian supermodel, legs that went on for days. A face that launched 1,000 magazine covers. She waited in the foyer downstairs, dripping in diamonds he'd had delivered that afternoon. Adrian checked his watch, a limited edition Patek Philippe, one of 3 in existence. 7:47 p.m. They were already late. Fashionably, of course. Arriving last was its own kind of power move. He turned from the mirror and walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing through the cavernous hallway. The mansion was a monument to excess. Italian marble, Russian artwork, Japanese minimalism somehow coexisting in a space that screamed wealth so loudly it didn't need to whisper. As he descended the grand staircase, Svetlana looked up with that practiced smile she'd perfected on runways from Milan to Tokyo. "You look devastating," she purred in heavily accented English. "I know," Adrian replied, not out of arrogance, but simple fact. His phone buzzed. A text from Mikhail, his second-in-command. Shipment secured. Chicago territory expanding as planned. No complications. Adrian typed back a single word. Good. He pocketed the phone and glanced toward the east wing of the mansion, the section he rarely visited. Somewhere in those rooms was Alara, his wife, the woman he'd married 3 years ago in a transaction that benefited both their families. Her father had needed Adrian's protection. Adrian had needed legitimacy, the kind that came with marrying into old money, the type that opened doors even his reputation couldn't kick down. Their marriage was a contract, nothing more. He provided security and wealth. She provided... He wasn't entirely sure what she provided, actually. A signature on documents, a name that looked good on charity event invitations. Silence. He saw her maybe twice a month, usually in passing. She kept to her wing. He kept to his empire. It worked. "Should we wait for your wife?" Svetlana asked, adjusting her dress, a crimson number that probably cost more than a luxury car. Adrian's jaw tightened. No. He'd left Alara a message earlier. Well, not a message exactly. His assistant had sent her a text. "Mr. Volkov will be attending the Continental Gala this evening. A car and driver are available if you wish to attend separately. A credit card has been left on the entry table for any purchases you may need." Polite, distant, exactly how their entire marriage functioned. As they stepped out into the rain, an umbrella appeared instantly over their heads, held by one of Adrian's security team. The Rolls-Royce waited, sleek and black, like a predator ready to strike. Svetlana slid into the car with practiced grace. Adrian followed, and the door closed with that particular sound of expensive engineering, solid, final, absolute. "This gala," Svetlana said, as they pulled away from the mansion, "I've heard it's where real power meets." "It's where power pretends to be civilized," Adrian corrected. "There's a difference." She laughed, too loud, too eager. He'd forgotten her by the time they reached the end of the driveway. The city blurred past the tinted windows. Lights reflected off wet pavement, turning the streets into rivers of gold and red. Adrian's empire stretched across this city and 7 others. Shipping routes that moved everything from legitimate cargo to things customs agents were paid handsomely not to inspect. Real estate that housed everyone from corporate executives to the kind of people who needed places that didn't appear on official records, information networks that knew what senators ate for breakfast, and which CEOs were one bad quarter away from doing something desperate. He'd built it from nothing. His father had been muscle, good with his fists, terrible with strategy. Adrian had been different. He'd understood that real power wasn't about violence. Violence was a tool, sure, but the foundation of empire was control, information, leverage, knowing which pressure points to apply and exactly how much force to use. By the time he was 30, he'd consolidated 5 rival territories. By 35, he'd expanded into international markets. Now at 38, his name alone could make corporations rethink their strategies and politicians reconsider their positions. The Continental Gala was where all those worlds collided: old money, new money, political power, corporate influence, criminal enterprise wearing expensive cologne, everyone pretending they weren't all playing the same game. The Rolls-Royce pulled up to the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, a building that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought subtlety was for the poor. Gold, marble, columns that reached toward the sky like the fingers of a greedy god. Adrian stepped out first. Cameras flashed immediately. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just stood there, letting them capture what they needed, the image of power, untouchable and absolute. Svetlana emerged beside him, performing for the cameras with expert precision. The reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Volkov, is this your new girlfriend? Are you still married? What's your position on the new trade regulations?" Adrian ignored them all. He always did. Answering questions was for people who needed approval. He walked through the entrance like he owned it, because in every way that mattered, he did. The lobby was a cathedral to wealth. Crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than small countries' GDP. Marble floors so polished they reflected like mirrors. A string quartet playing something classical in the corner. Mozart, maybe. Adrian didn't care about music unless it was useful. Security checked their invitations with the kind of discretion that came with knowing exactly who not to offend. Adrian's invitation was gold-embossed, personalized, coded in a way that told security he was Tier 1 access. He could go anywhere, speak to anyone, and security would simply make space. They moved toward the grand ballroom. Svetlana's heels clicked against marble. Adrian's steps were silent, a habit from years of learning to move through spaces where being heard could get you killed. The ballroom doors opened, and then everything stopped. Not literally. People were still moving, still talking, still performing their elaborate dances of social hierarchy. But something had shifted in the atmosphere, like the air before lightning strikes. Adrian felt it immediately. The subtle turning of heads, the pause in conversations, the way attention flowed like water toward a single point. He followed that current, and his entire world tilted. At the top of the grand staircase, the one designed specifically for dramatic entrances, stood a woman who didn't need drama because she was the event. She wore black, not the attention-grabbing kind of black, but the kind that absorbed light and gave nothing back. The dress was elegant, structured, architectural, more like armor than fashion. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, revealing a face that could have been carved from marble. High cheekbones, sharp jawline, eyes that looked like they could calculate your net worth, your weaknesses, and your life expectancy in under 3 seconds. But it wasn't the dress or the face that made the room fall silent. It was the way she stood, like gravity bent around her, like she wasn't entering the space was adjusting to acknowledge her. And then someone near Adrian whispered a name. Alara Sorel. His heart stopped. No. Impossible. Couldn't be. But even as his rational mind rejected it, his eyes told him the truth. The woman commanding the attention of every powerful person in that ballroom, the woman who moved down the staircase with the kind of confidence that came from owning rooms far more dangerous than this one, was his wife. Alara descended the stairs with mathematical precision, each step calculated, each movement deliberate. She didn't smile, didn't perform. She simply existed, and existence was enough. A senator moved toward her immediately, Gerald Hutchins, a man who chaired 3 committees and had his fingers in enough pies to feed a small nation. He approached Alara with the kind of deference Adrian had only seen people show to presidents and kings. "Ms. Sorel," Hutchins said, actually bowing slightly. We weren't certain you'd attend. Senator, Alara replied. Her voice was cool, precise, like a surgical instrument. I rarely do, but the circumstances warranted an exception. Of course, of course. Your insight on the Eastern European situation was accurate, Alara finished, as I indicated it would be. Adrian stood frozen. Svetlana was saying something beside him, but it sounded like she was underwater. He couldn't process anything except the impossible image in front of him. That was Alara, his wife. The woman he saw twice a month in passing. The woman he'd left a credit card and a car for tonight, like she was some distant relative who might need a ride. A crowd had formed around her now. Not the desperate, clawing kind of crowd. The respectful kind. The kind that formed around people whose time was valuable and whose attention was earned, not demanded. A man in a Swiss banking executive's badge spoke to her in rapid German. She responded fluently, correcting something in his statement with surgical precision. A woman wearing enough jewelry to fund a small country approached next. Katerina Voloshin, head of one of Eastern Europe's largest humanitarian foundations. They spoke in Russian, and Adrian caught enough to hear Katerina thanking Alara for the intervention in Chechnya that saved hundreds of lives. Adrian's mind raced. Intervention? What intervention? What the hell was happening? Adrian, Svetlana tugged at his arm. Why is everyone staring at that woman? I don't know, he lied. But he was starting to. More people approached Alara, a Chinese diplomat, a British intelligence analyst, a Brazilian infrastructure minister. Each conversation was brief, precise, purposeful. Alara never lingered. She gave each person exactly what they needed, a confirmation, a subtle correction, a piece of information that clearly had weight, and then moved on. She was working the room, but not like a socialite or a politician, like a general surveying a battlefield. Adrian watched, unable to move, as a pattern emerged. Every person who spoke to Alara treated her with something between respect and caution, like she was someone whose favor could change fortunes and whose displeasure could end careers. How had he not known this? How had he been married to this woman for 3 years and never seen any of this? I need to speak with someone, Adrian said to Svetlana, his voice distant. Who? He didn't answer. He was already moving. Through the crowd, past clusters of billionaires and politicians, past the people who usually parted for him because his reputation preceded him like a sword. But as he moved toward Alara, something strange happened. People didn't part for him. They were too focused on her. He had to navigate around conversations, wait for openings, actually maneuver through social space, something he hadn't had to do in over a decade. By the time he reached her, Alara was speaking with James Chen, a tech billionaire whose AI company had just gone public for $30 billion. Your assessment was correct, Chen was saying. The vulnerability in the encryption protocol was exactly where you indicated. We've patched it, but if that had gone public, it won't, Alara said simply. Chen nodded, relieved. I owe you. Again. You owe me a favor, Alara corrected, which I will collect when necessary, as always. Chen smiled nervously and stepped away. And then Alara's eyes met Adrian's. For 3 seconds, neither of them spoke. Her expression didn't change, didn't show surprise or concern or anything that might indicate she cared that her husband was standing in front of her with another woman's lipstick, probably still on his collar. Adrian? She said finally. Her tone was the same one she might use to acknowledge a delivery person, polite, distant, utterly neutral. Alara, his voice came out rougher than intended. I didn't know you were attending. I sent confirmation to your assistant 3 days ago. I didn't receive it. Your assistant's organizational failures are not my concern. She turned slightly, preparing to move to the next conversation. Dismissing him. Actually dismissing him in a room full of people who watched his every move like hawks tracking prey. Wait, Adrian said. Alara paused, turned back, one eyebrow raised slightly, the only indication of curiosity. Yes? What are you doing here? The same thing you are, attending a gala. That's not what I mean, and you know it. A man approached, another senator, this one from the Foreign Relations Committee. Ms. Sorrell, I was hoping we could discuss... In a moment, Senator, Alara said without looking at him. The senator actually stepped back, waiting, obedient. Alara's eyes returned to Adrian. Is there something specific you need? I need to know why everyone in this room is treating you like... He paused, searching for words. Like you're someone who matters. Something flickered across her face. Not anger, something colder. I am someone who matters, Adrian. You simply never bothered to notice. Before he could respond, she turned and walked away. The senator immediately filled the space she'd left, speaking to her in low, urgent tones about something involving Syrian refugees and resource allocation. Adrian stood there, surrounded by the noise of hundreds of conversations, feeling more alone than he had in years. Svetlana appeared beside him again. Who was that? My wife, Adrian said quietly. Your what? But Adrian wasn't listening anymore. He was watching Alara move through the crowd like water through stone, inevitable, unstoppable, reshaping everything she touched. And for the first time in his carefully controlled life, Adrian Volkov realized he had no idea who he'd married. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in being invisible in plain sight. Adrian Volkov, the man whose presence usually dominated any room he entered, found himself relegated to the periphery. People still acknowledged him, a nod here, a brief conversation there, but their attention was elsewhere, on her. Alara had stationed herself near the eastern windows, where the city lights created a backdrop of gold against the night. She wasn't working the room anymore. She didn't need to. People came to her, a steady stream of the most powerful individuals at the gala, each waiting their turn like supplicants before a throne. Adrian watched from across the ballroom, nursing a whiskey he hadn't actually drunk, while Svetlana chattered about something he wasn't processing. A woman in her 60s approached Alara, Margaret Ashford, British Parliament, one of the most influential voices in European politics. Adrian had tried to get a meeting with her for 8 months. His people had called, had sent inquiries through proper channels, had even attempted less proper channels. Nothing had worked. But Ashford walked straight to Alara like they were old colleagues. The situation in Poland, Ashford said without preamble. Your assessment was devastating. Half my committee is still recovering. Truth often has that effect, Alara replied. The Prime Minister wants to know if you'll consult on the Eastern expansion. I don't consult for governments, Margaret. You know this. Then what do you do? Alara's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. I solve problems governments create. There's a difference. Ashford laughed, a real laugh, not the practiced political kind. Fair enough. But if the situation deteriorates, it won't. I've already addressed the primary instability factors. Already? Ashford looked stunned. How could you possibly? Because I don't wait for situations to deteriorate before acting. That's why you pay me. Adrian's hand tightened around his glass. Pay her? What the hell was Alara doing that had British Parliament members paying her for services? Ashford left. Next came a man Adrian recognized from intelligence briefings. Dmitry Volkonsky, former FSB, now running private security for oligarchs who needed the kind of protection that came with plausible deniability. The information you provided on the Bratva situation, Volkonsky said in Russian, prevented a war. That was the intention, Alara replied in the same language, flawless and unaccented. You have my gratitude, and my services should you need them. I'll remember that. Adrian felt like he was watching a stranger. This woman spoke fluent Russian? Since when? In 3 years of marriage, he'd never heard her speak anything but English. And what was this about preventing a war? What Bratva situation? His phone buzzed. A text from Mikhail. Boss, something strange. Got a call from our Moscow contact. Says someone intervened in the Volkov-Bratva conflict last month. Stopped it before it started. Didn't get a name, but said it was someone with serious reach. Adrian stared at his phone. Last month, there had been tension with the Bratva, Russian organized crime that operated in territories adjacent to Adrian's. It could have turned bloody. But then, suddenly, the tension had evaporated. Communications had resumed. The Bratva had backed off completely. At the time, Adrian had assumed it was because his reputation had preceded him, that the Bratva had realized challenging him wasn't worth the cost. But what if it hadn't been his reputation at all? He looked up at Alara, who was now speaking with a man from the World Bank. Her posture was perfect, her attention absolute. She never fidgeted, never checked her phone, never showed any sign of discomfort or uncertainty. She was the most controlled person Adrian had ever seen, and he'd been married to her for 3 years without noticing. The realization was beginning to feel like a wound. "Adrian," Svetlana said, pulling at his arm, "can we go? This is boring." "No." "But—" I said no. His tone cut through whatever protest she'd been forming. Svetlana fell silent, hurt flickering across her face. Adrian didn't care. He couldn't care about anything except the impossible woman across the room. The gala continued. Dinner was announced. People moved toward the grand dining hall, a space designed to seat 500 of the world's elite at tables arranged by careful social calculation. Adrian's table was near the center, prime position, maximum visibility. He'd been seated with a German industrialist, a Japanese tech CEO, a French fashion mogul, and their respective partners. Alara's table was in the northeast corner, away from the center, away from the spotlight. But as Adrian watched, he noticed something. The northeast corner table, the one that should have been relegated to lower-tier attendees, was surrounded by other tables that had been repositioned slightly, creating a subtle buffer, a zone of space. Like even the seating arrangement bent around her. Adrian sat through dinner in a fog. The German industrialist talked about manufacturing. The Japanese CEO discussed AI development. The French mogul complained about supply chain issues. Adrian responded when necessary, said the right things, maintained the facade. But his attention kept drifting to that corner table. Alara sat with her back straight, eating with precise movements. Her table included a WHO director, an Interpol liaison, someone from the UN, and a woman Adrian vaguely recognized from humanitarian crisis management. Not social climbers, not trophy wives or ambitious executives trying to network their way up. People who dealt with global-scale problems. After dinner came the speeches. The host, a banking CEO, whose family tree included 3 centuries of wealth, welcomed everyone. Thanked them for their generous donations to various causes. Made jokes that everyone laughed at because his family owned half the city's real estate. Then came the announcements, awards for philanthropy, recognition for humanitarian efforts, the usual performance of wealthy people congratulating themselves for solving problems they'd often helped create. And then the host said something that made Adrian's blood freeze. "We have a special guest tonight, someone who rarely attends these events, but whose work has saved countless lives across 4 continents. Please join me in welcoming Alara Sorrell, founder of the Meridian Initiative." The room erupted in applause. Not polite applause, real applause. The kind reserved for people who'd actually done something worth recognizing. Alara stood, nodded once to acknowledge the recognition. Didn't smile, didn't wave, just stood there, accepting the moment with the same precision she applied to everything else. And then she sat back down, making it clear she had no intention of giving a speech or drawing more attention to herself than necessary. The host laughed. "Ms. Sorrell remains as modest as ever. For those who don't know, the Meridian Initiative has provided critical infrastructure support, conflict resolution, and humanitarian aid in regions most organizations won't touch. Her work in Central Africa alone has changed nothing that needs publicity." Alara's voice cut through the microphone system. She hadn't stood again, hadn't moved toward a microphone. But somehow her voice carried, clear, absolute, final. "The work continues. Recognition is unnecessary." The host nodded, clearly expecting this response. "Of course, but those of us who know the extent of your contributions wanted to ensure you received proper acknowledgement." Alara said nothing, just inclined her head slightly, a gesture that managed to be both polite and dismissive. Adrian sat frozen in his chair. The Meridian Initiative, he'd heard that name. His intelligence network had flagged it multiple times over the past 2 years. An organization that operated in conflict zones, providing everything from medical supplies to negotiation services. They had access to places even governments couldn't reach. They moved resources across borders that were supposed to be locked down. They solved problems that everyone else considered unsolvable. His network had tried to identify who ran the initiative. They'd found nothing. No CEO, no board of directors, no public face, just results. Buildings that appeared in war zones. Schools that materialized in regions where infrastructure had collapsed. Negotiations that somehow resulted in ceasefires when both sides had sworn to fight to the death. Adrian had assumed it was backed by some coalition of governments, or maybe a group of billionaires funding operations from behind corporate veils. He'd never considered that it might be one woman, his wife. The woman he'd left a credit card and a car for tonight. The woman he saw twice a month. The woman he'd treated like an accessory to his empire. The gala continued, but Adrian had stopped participating. He sat at his table, watching Alara in that corner, and felt something he hadn't experienced in 20 years. Shame. By midnight, the gala had shifted into its final phase. The official program had ended. Now it was just networking. The real business of events like this, where deals were made in whispered conversations and alliances were forged over expensive champagne. Adrian had been cornered by a Polish shipping magnate who wanted to discuss expanding operations into Adrian's territories. He listened with half his attention, gave non-committal responses, and finally excused himself. He needed air, or more accurately, he needed to find Alara. But when he looked toward her table, she was gone. Adrian's pulse quickened. He scanned the ballroom, checked the bar area, the lounge. Nothing. He pulled out his phone and texted Mikhail, "Track Alara's location. Now." The response came 30 seconds later. "Can't, boss. Her phone's not on any network we can access. It's like she's a ghost." Adrian felt a chill. His network could track almost anyone. He had access to satellite feeds, cellular towers, security cameras across a dozen cities, but his own wife was invisible to it? He moved through the venue, checking each space with increasing urgency. Not panic, Adrian Volkov didn't panic, but something close to it. Finally, he found her. On a private terrace, accessible only through a service corridor that most guests didn't know existed. The door was propped open slightly, and through the gap he could see her silhouette against the city lights. She stood alone, looking out over the skyline, her posture unchanged from inside, perfect, controlled, untouchable. Adrian pushed the door open fully and stepped outside. The rain had stopped, but the air was still wet, heavy with the smell of ozone and possibility. Alara didn't turn. "Did you need something, Adrian?" Her voice carried across the terrace like a blade across silk. "Yes," he said. "I need to understand what the hell is happening." "Nothing is happening. You're attending a gala. I'm attending a gala. This is normal." "Don't." His voice came out harder than intended. "Don't treat me like an idiot." Now she turned. Her expression was neutral, but something flickered in her eyes, curiosity maybe, or assessment. "What do you want to know?" she asked. "Everything. Start with who you are." "I'm your wife. You signed the papers 3 years ago." "That's not what I mean." "Then perhaps you should be more specific." Adrian stepped closer. "The Meridian Initiative, the consultations with senators and prime ministers, the intervention in the Bratva conflict, the fact that every powerful person in that ballroom treats you like you're someone who can end their careers with a phone call. Start there." Alara regarded him for a long moment. Wow. The city lights reflected in her dark eyes, making them look like they contained entire constellations. "You never asked before," she said finally. "I'm asking now." 3 years late. "Answer the question, Alara." She turned back toward the city. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, but somehow more dangerous. "Before I married you, I built a network. It started with information. I realized early that knowing things before other people knew them was the most valuable currency in the world. So I built systems to collect information, not just surface-level data, deep intelligence, the kind that reveals patterns, predicts movements, identifies opportunities before they become obvious." Adrian listened, not interrupting. "That network grew," Alara continued. "It became more than information gathering. It became problem solving. Governments would come to me with situations they couldn't resolve through official channels. Corporations needed conflicts managed without public attention. Individuals with resources needed those resources directed toward outcomes that served larger purposes." "You're a fixer." "I'm an architect," she corrected. "Fixers respond to problems. I prevent them from forming in the first place, or I create solutions that serve multiple purposes simultaneously." The Meridian Initiative is one branch of a larger structure. It handles humanitarian operations in zones where traditional aid organizations can't or won't operate. We provide infrastructure, medical support, negotiation services, conflict resolution. But more importantly, we create stability in regions that destabilize global systems. Adrian's mind raced through implications. You're saying you operate in war zones. I'm saying I prevent wars from spreading beyond their initial territories. I contain damage. I redirect violence toward less destructive outcomes. I save lives that governments consider acceptable losses. How? By being what you are, Adrian. Someone with resources, connections, and the willingness to operate outside conventional systems. The difference is, I don't build empire. I build stability. Adrian felt like he was standing on shifting ground. Why didn't you tell me any of this? Alara turned to face him again. Her expression was still neutral, but something in her eyes had sharpened. You never asked. In 3 years of marriage, you never once inquired about my work, my interests, my capabilities, or my past. You provided financial support and security, which I didn't need but accepted because our marriage served other purposes. And you assumed I was content to be invisible in your mansion, emerging occasionally for signatures on documents. I thought, Adrian started, then stopped. What had he thought? That she was just old money with a good name? A convenient addition to his legitimacy? You thought I was irrelevant, Alara finished. Which was useful, actually. People underestimate what they don't see. You've built your empire on that principle. You should recognize it when it's applied to you. Adrian's jaw tightened. The Bratva situation, that was you. Yes. How did you know about it? Because I monitor every major criminal organization's movements across Eastern Europe. Your conflict with the Bratva would have destabilized 3 countries, disrupted supply chains that affect millions of civilians, and created opportunities for worse actors to move into the resulting power vacuum. So I intervened. How? I identified what both sides actually wanted, which wasn't war. It was control over specific territories and resources. I facilitated a backroom negotiation that gave both sides access to what they needed without direct conflict. I also provided intelligence that made both sides realize going to war would result in losses neither could afford, and I arranged for neutral third parties to monitor the agreement, ensuring compliance. You did all that in less than a week. I did all that in 3 days. I would have done it faster, but some of the principles were difficult to reach. Adrian stared at her. This woman, this person he'd been married to for 3 years, who he'd dismissed as a quiet addition to his household, had prevented a war that would have cost him millions and possibly his life. Why? He asked. Why help me? I didn't help you, Alara said. I prevented unnecessary destabilization. You were a variable in a larger equation. Your survival served a purpose. What purpose? Maintaining balance. You're dangerous, Adrian, but you're predictable. You operate according to rules, violent rules, but rules nonetheless. If you'd gone to war with the Bratva and lost, the resulting power vacuum would have been filled by organizations without your restraint. If you'd won, you would have overextended your resources and created vulnerabilities that other predators would exploit. Either outcome would have been destabilizing. So you protected me to protect stability? I protected multiple interests simultaneously. That's what I do. Adrian felt something crack inside his chest. You're telling me you've been operating a global network that prevents wars, manages conflicts, and influences international policy, while living in my mansion and eating dinner in your wing twice a month? Yes. And you never thought to mention this. You never asked, Alara repeated. And frankly, Adrian, your empire and mine don't intersect except at specific points. You build power through control, territory, and force. I build stability through information, precision, and prevention. We're not competitors. We're not collaborators. We're simply adjacent. We're married. We have a legal contract, Alara corrected, which has served its purposes for both parties. You needed legitimacy. I needed security while building certain operations that required a low profile. Our arrangement has been functional. Functional, Adrian repeated. The word tasted bitter. Yes. He stepped closer to her, close enough to see the precise way her hair was pulled back, not a single strand out of place, close enough to notice she wore minimal jewelry, just a simple watch, no earrings, no necklace, nothing that could be grabbed or used against her. What happens now? He asked. What do you mean? I know who you are now. I've seen what you can do. That changes things. Alara's eyes narrowed slightly. Does it? Yes. How? Adrian realized he didn't have an answer. How did it change things? What did he want from this woman who just revealed herself to be more powerful than anyone in his organization? Before he could formulate a response, Alara's phone buzzed. She pulled it from a hidden pocket in her dress. Of course she had hidden pockets. This woman planned for everything, and glanced at the screen. Her expression didn't change, but Adrian saw her posture shift slightly. Not tension exactly. Readiness. I need to leave, she said. Why? Because the situation in Libya just deteriorated, and I need to make several calls before it becomes irreversible. Libya? What situation? The kind that kills people if left unmanaged. Excuse me. She moved past him toward the terrace door. Adrian caught her arm, gently but firmly enough to stop her. Wait. She looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. Her expression was unreadable. Let go, Adrian. Not until you answer one more question. You don't give me orders. I'm not giving orders. I'm asking, please. The please seemed to surprise her. Her posture relaxed fractionally. One question, she said. The day we got married, did you know what you were getting into? Did you know who I was? Alara's lips curved slightly, that same not-quite smile from earlier. Adrian, I knew everything about you before we ever met. Your organization's structure, your revenue streams, your vulnerabilities, your capabilities, your history, your psychological profile. I knew which of your lieutenants were loyal and which were waiting for opportunities to challenge you. I knew about the shipping routes you use for legitimate cargo and the ones you use for contraband. I knew about your connections to 8 different national governments and 17 major criminal organizations. I knew everything. Adrian felt like she'd punched him. Why marry me then? Because your empire, despite its violence and criminality, serves a stabilizing function. You control territories that would otherwise be controlled by worse actors. You enforce rules that prevent complete chaos. You're a necessary evil. And I needed the protection your name provided while I built certain operations that required discretion. Our marriage was strategic on both sides, even if only one of us knew it. She pulled her arm free, not violently, just with enough pressure to make him realize he couldn't actually hold her against her will. I need to go now, she said. People will die if I don't. Will I see you at the mansion? Probably not. I'll be in Libya for the next few days, then Zurich, then possibly Jakarta, depending on how the Indonesian situation develops. The Indonesian situation? The one that doesn't concern you. Goodbye, Adrian. She walked through the terrace door and disappeared into the corridor. Adrian stood alone on the terrace, surrounded by city lights and the weight of everything he'd just learned. His wife, the woman he'd dismissed as irrelevant for 3 years, was one of the most powerful people in the world, and he'd never even noticed. His phone buzzed. A text from Svetlana. Where did you go? I'm bored. Adrian stared at the message. At this woman he'd brought to the gala like a trophy. At the empty performance of power he'd been engaging in while his wife was actually reshaping the world. He typed back, Get a car home. We're done. Then he pocketed his phone and walked back into the gala. But everything looked different now. The powerful people networking in clusters. How many of them answered to Alara? How many of them owed their positions to her interventions? The politicians making deals in corners, how many of those deals had been shaped by her intelligence, her negotiations, her invisible hand? The entire structure of power he'd been navigating suddenly looked like a stage set. And he'd just realized he wasn't directing the play. Someone else was. Someone who'd been living in his mansion for 3 years while he'd been too blind to see her. Adrian left the gala an hour later. Alone. In the Rolls-Royce that suddenly felt too empty, too quiet, too much like a symbol of everything he'd gotten wrong. The city blurred past the windows. His empire spread out beneath him, territory he'd fought for, built, defended. But now he couldn't stop thinking about a woman in black standing on a terrace, telling him she prevented wars while he'd been treating her like furniture. When he arrived back at the mansion, he didn't go to his wing. He went to hers. The door was locked. He knocked. No answer. She'd said she was going to Libya. She probably hadn't even come home. Adrian stood in the hallway for a long moment, staring at that closed door. Then he turned and walked back to his study. He had calls to make, research to do. Because if there was one thing Adrian Volkov understood, it was this. He'd just discovered his most critical blind spot, and blind spots got you killed. Adrian didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study until dawn, pulling apart 3 years of marriage like someone examining a crime scene. Every memory, every interaction, every moment he'd dismissed as insignificant, all of it took on new weight now. The way Alara had always declined to attend his business dinners. He'd assumed she wasn't interested. Now he wondered if she'd been managing crises in places he couldn't pronounce while he'd been negotiating shipping routes. The times he'd seen her on the phone, speaking languages he didn't recognize. He'd thought maybe she was talking to family. Now he realized she'd probably been preventing armed conflicts or negotiating hostage releases. The fact that she never asked him for anything, never demanded attention, never complained about his absences, never seemed to care when he brought other women to events. He'd thought she was passive. Turned out she just had better things to do than fight for scraps of his attention. By 6 a.m, Adrian had compiled a list of questions that filled 3 pages. He'd also ordered Mikhail to run a deep investigation into the Meridian Initiative, Alara's network, and every organization she'd ever been connected to. Mikhail had called back an hour later, sounding uncomfortable. "Boss, we've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where every search we run into the Meridian Initiative hits walls. Government-grade encryption. Servers that rewrote through so many proxies we can't trace origins. Financial records that don't exist in any database we can access. It's like trying to investigate a ghost." "Try harder." "We are trying. But boss, whoever built this network knew exactly how to hide from people like us. It's professional-level operational security. Military grade, maybe better." Adrian had hung up, feeling something he rarely experienced. Inadequate. His entire empire was built on information and leverage. But his own wife had constructed an organization he couldn't even properly investigate. Now, as morning light filtered through the study windows, Adrian stood and walked to the east wing, to Alara's door. It was still locked, still silent behind it. He pulled out his phone and texted her. "We need to talk." No response. He tried calling, straight to voicemail. Not even her voice, just a generic automated message. Adrian pocketed his phone and made a decision. If Alara wouldn't come to him, he'd learn everything he could without her. Over the next 3 days, Adrian became obsessed. He pulled every resource his organization had. He interviewed people who'd worked with the Meridian Initiative. He traced financial transactions that seemed connected to Alara's operations. He studied patterns in international conflicts that had mysteriously de-escalated. What he found was both impressive and terrifying. The Meridian Initiative had operations in 43 countries. Not just humanitarian aid, though that was part of it. They ran schools in Syria that somehow stayed open despite the war. They operated medical clinics in Afghanistan that both government forces and Taliban left untouched. They'd built infrastructure in South Sudan that connected regions torn apart by civil war. But that was just the surface. Deeper investigation revealed negotiation services that had prevented at least 7 armed conflicts in the past 2 years. Intelligence networks that rivaled most national agencies. Financial systems that moved resources across borders with more efficiency than the World Bank. And all of it traced back eventually to Alara Sorel. Not officially. Her name didn't appear on any documents. But the patterns were clear once Adrian knew what to look for. A negotiation in Colombia that succeeded because someone provided intelligence neither side thought anyone had access to. A ceasefire in Yemen that materialized after key figures received information that changed their strategic calculations. A humanitarian crisis in the Philippines that resolved when resources appeared from sources no one could identify. Every major stabilization effort in the past 5 years had Alara's fingerprints on it, even when her name was nowhere in the records. Adrian sat in his study on the 3rd night, surrounded by reports, and felt something he hadn't experienced in 2 decades. Respect bordering on fear. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Volkov?" A woman's voice, professional, efficient. "Ms. Sorel has asked me to schedule a meeting with you." "When?" "Tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. The location will be sent to your phone 1 hour before the meeting." "That's not how I operate." "It's how Ms. Sorel operates." "Will you be attending?" Adrian's jaw tightened. He was being summoned, like some subordinate. Every instinct told him to refuse, to demand the meeting happen on his terms, at his location, on his schedule. But he needed answers more than he needed pride. "I'll be there," he said. The woman hung up without another word. The next day crawled past. Adrian tried to focus on his own business. There were shipments to coordinate, territories to manage, problems that required his attention. But his mind kept drifting to that evening meeting, to Alara, to everything he still didn't understand. At 6 p.m., his phone buzzed with an address, a building in the financial district, 23rd floor, no other information. Adrian arrived 20 minutes early, a habit from years of never letting anyone else control the timing of important meetings. The building was one of those glass towers that looked like it was made of money and arrogance. Security was tight, but professional. They checked his ID, made a call, that then directed him to a private elevator. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse office. Not a law firm, not a corporate headquarters, something else entirely. The space was minimal. White walls, dark floors, furniture that probably cost more than most cars but looked almost invisible, designed not to draw attention. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city spreading out below, lights beginning to glow as evening settled. And in the center of the room, behind a desk that looked like it was carved from a single piece of black stone, sat Alara. She wore gray. Still severe, still architectural. Her hair pulled back with the same precision. She looked up as he entered, her expression neutral. "Adrian, you're early." Force of habit. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Adrian felt his jaw tighten again, but he sat in one of the chairs across from her desk. The chair was comfortable, but positioned slightly lower than hers, a psychological power play that would have impressed him if it wasn't being used against him. "You've been investigating me," Alara said. Not a question. "Yes." "And what did you find?" "Not enough. Your operational security is better than most intelligence agencies. It needs to be. My work requires discretion." "Your work requires a lot of things, apparently." Adrian leaned back, trying to project ease he didn't feel. "I'm still trying to understand why you agreed to marry me if you were running this kind of operation." "I told you, strategic purposes." "Be more specific." Alara regarded him for a moment, then stood and walked to the windows. The city lights reflected in the glass, turning her into a silhouette against possibility. "My network operates in places where official channels fail," she said. "War zones, failed states, regions controlled by organizations like yours. To move freely in those spaces, I needed protection. Not physical protection, I can handle that myself, but political protection. Social legitimacy, the kind that comes from being Mrs. Adrian Volkov. So I was cover. You were strategic positioning. Your reputation opened doors. Your connections provided access. Your name gave me reasons to be in places I needed to be without drawing questions." Adrian felt something twist in his chest. "You used me." "We used each other," Alara corrected, turning to face him. "You needed legitimacy, old money, respected family name, social credibility. I provided that. I needed operational cover and political insulation. You provided that. It was a fair exchange." "You could have told me." "No, I couldn't. The moment you knew what I was doing, you would have tried to control it or leverage it for your own purposes. That's who you are, Adrian. You see power and you want to own it." "That's not—" He stopped, because she was right. If he'd known 3 years ago that Alara ran a global network, he absolutely would have tried to integrate it with his own operations, to use her resources for his expansion, to leverage her connections for his benefit. "You see the problem?" Alara said. "I see that you don't trust me. Trust is earned, and in 3 years of marriage, you gave me no reason to believe you saw me as anything other than a convenient signature on documents." Adrian stood, unable to sit still anymore. He walked to the windows, stopping a few feet from her. "That was before I knew who you were. And now that you know? Now I want to understand. Not control, not leverage. Understand." Alara's expression shifted slightly. Not quite skepticism, but close. "Why?" "Because in 20 years of building my empire, I've never met anyone who operates the way you do. I thought I understood power. I thought I knew how to read people, how to identify threats and opportunities. But you were right there, in my own house, and I missed you completely. That doesn't happen to me. It just did. Which means I need to recalibrate. I need to understand what I missed and why I missed it. That sounds like you're treating this as a tactical problem. Everything is a tactical problem. Alara almost smiled. Almost. That's your limitation, Adrian. You reduce everything to power dynamics and strategic positioning, but some things exist outside those frameworks. Like what? Like people who don't want power over others, who don't measure success by how much they control or how many territories they dominate. People who solve problems because the problems need solving, not because solving them increases their influence. Adrian studied her face, the sharp lines, the dark eyes, the absolute control in every micro-expression. You're telling me you don't want power. I'm telling you I have power and I use it differently than you do. I don't accumulate. I apply. I don't build empire. I create stability. There's a difference. What about the Bratva situation? You intervened there to protect stability, but you also protected me. Why? I told you, you're a stabilizing force, even if your methods are violent. The alternatives were worse. That's all I am to you? A stabilizing force? Alara turned away from the window and walked back to her desk. She picked up a folder, actual paper, not digital, and held it out to him. What's this? Adrian asked. Information about a problem developing in Prague, a power vacuum created by the recent arrest of Karel Novak's organization. 3 groups are moving to fill that vacuum. If they collide, the resulting conflict will destabilize Central European trafficking routes for legitimate and illegitimate goods, cause civilian casualties, and create opportunities for terrorist organizations to establish footholds. Adrian took the folder but didn't open it. Why are you giving me this? Because you have the resources and connections to prevent that collision. If you move quickly, within the next 72 hours, you can establish presence in Prague before the competing groups commit to violent conflict. Your reputation alone will deter 2 of the groups. The third will require negotiation, which I've already initiated on your behalf. You're managing this for me. I'm preventing a destabilization that serves no one's interests. You're the most efficient tool to achieve that outcome. Adrian opened the folder. Inside was detailed intelligence, organizational structures, key players, financial vulnerabilities, communication intercepts, information that would have taken his network weeks to compile, handed to him on a silver platter. This is military-grade intelligence, he said quietly. It's adequate for the situation. Alara, he looked up at her. This kind of information doesn't just exist. Someone gathered it, compiled it, analyzed it. How many people work for you? Enough. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. My network structure is not your concern. Adrian felt frustration building. If we're going to work together, we're not working together, Alara interrupted. I'm providing you with information that serves my purposes. What you do with it serves yours. That's not collaboration, that's parallel operation. It could be more than that. Why would I want it to be more? The question hung in the air between them. Adrian realized he didn't have a good answer. Why should Alara want to collaborate with him? She'd been operating successfully for years without his involvement. She had resources he couldn't access, connections he didn't have, capabilities that impressed even his most experienced operatives. What did he have that she needed? Before he could formulate a response, Alara's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and something in her posture changed. Tension, subtle but real. I need to take this, she said. Is it Libya? Jakarta. The situation accelerated. She looked at him. You can show yourself out. Use the information in that folder or don't. It's your choice. She turned away, phone already to her ear, speaking in rapid Indonesian. Adrian stood there for a moment, holding the folder, feeling dismissed. Then he left. In the elevator down, Adrian opened the folder again and read through it more carefully. The intelligence was incredible. Not just surface-level information, but deep analysis of motivations, vulnerabilities, strategic options. This was the kind of brief governments paid millions for. And Alara had just handed it to him like it was nothing. His phone rang. Mikhail. Boss, we've got movement in Prague. 3 organizations positioning for territorial control. Could get ugly fast. I know, Adrian said. I'm handling it. How did you... I'll brief you in an hour. Get the Prague team ready to move. We're establishing presence in the next 48 hours. Adrian hung up and stared at the folder in his hands. Alara had said she was using him as a tool, but tools didn't get briefed. Tools didn't get strategic intelligence. Tools just got pointed at problems. What was she really doing? Over the next 2 days, Adrian executed the Prague operation exactly as Alara's intelligence suggested. His team moved into the territory, established presence with minimal violence, and made contact with the 3 competing groups. 2 backed off immediately. His reputation preceded him, just as Alara had predicted. The 3rd required negotiation. Adrian called the number Alara had included in the folder. A man answered, speaking Czech with a German accent. Mr. Volkov, Miss Sorrell said you would call. She set this up? She arranged the framework. You provide the final details. I represent the Schneider Group. We don't want conflict with you, but we need access to specific routes through Prague for pharmaceutical distribution. Adrian smiled. Pharmaceutical distribution meant drugs, obviously, but the man was being professional about it. Access to routes is possible, Adrian said, for a percentage of revenue and agreement to use my logistics infrastructure. Ms. Sorrell suggested 15% in shared logistics. Is this acceptable? 20%. 17%, and we provide intelligence on competing operations in the region. Adrian considered. Deal. I'll have contracts drafted within 24 hours. Excellent. Ms. Sorrell was correct. You are efficient. The man hung up. Adrian sat in his Prague hotel room staring at his phone. Alara had set up the entire negotiation before he'd even arrived. She'd predicted the terms, structured the conversation, and positioned him to succeed. Why? His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Prague stabilized. Well done. Adrian typed back. You set this up before you even gave me the folder. Yes. Why? Because it needed to happen. You were the most efficient path to that outcome. You keep saying that. You keep using me as a tool. 3 dots appeared, indicating she was typing, then stopped, then started again. Finally, we should talk. Not about Prague. About something else. What? A threat to your organization that's larger than Prague. Can you come back to the city? Adrian felt cold. What kind of threat? The kind that kills you if we don't address it. Tomorrow. Same location. 9 a.m. The message ended there, no further explanation, no details. Adrian booked a flight that left in 3 hours. The next morning, he arrived at the glass tower at 8:45. The same private elevator, the same minimal office. But this time, Alara wasn't alone. A man sat in one of the guest chairs, early 60s, gray hair, expensive suit, the kind of face that had seen things and survived them. He stood when Adrian entered. Mr. Volkov, I'm David Carrington. I work with Ms. Sorrell on certain matters. Adrian shook his hand, noting the military posture, the assessment in Carrington's eyes. Former intelligence, probably CIA or MI6. Adrian, sit, Alara said. She stood behind her desk, and on the wall behind her was a large screen showing a map of Eastern Europe and Asia. Red markers dotted the map like a disease spreading. What am I looking at? Adrian asked. A coordinated effort to dismantle your organization, Alara said. It started 6 months ago. Multiple rival groups working together, which should have been your first warning, since your competitors normally hate each other more than they hate you. Adrian's blood went cold. Who? The Bratva, obviously. The Sinaloa cartel's European operations, Yakuza groups out of Osaka, Albanian networks in the Balkans, and 3 others we're still identifying. Alara touched a control, and the map zoomed in on specific regions. They're not attacking directly. They're eroding your foundation, turning your suppliers against you, bribing your distribution channels, feeding intelligence about your operations to law enforcement in 4 countries. That's impossible. Your security is excellent, Carrington interrupted. But this operation is better. They've been planning it for over a year. Miss Sorrell discovered it 3 months ago. Adrian looked at Alara. 3 months ago. Why am I only hearing about it now? Because I've been dismantling it, Alara said simply. I've redirected law enforcement attention away from your key operations. I've identified and neutralized 3 of the supplier betrayals. I've disrupted coordination between the rival groups. I've been buying you time to consolidate defenses without triggering a direct confrontation you weren't ready for. The room felt like it was tilting. You've been protecting me for 3 months. I've been protecting stability. Your collapse would create chaos. Chaos benefits no one except extremists and terrorists who thrive in power vacuums. That's the only reason? Alara's expression didn't change. What other reason would there be? Adrian didn't answer. He turned to the map. How bad is it? Without intervention, you have 6 weeks before critical operations begin failing, Carrington said. Maybe 8 if you're lucky. After that, your empire collapses in stages. First, revenue drops, then territory losses. Then your own people start defecting to whoever looks like the winning side. Within 6 months, you're finished. What's the intervention? Alara touched another control. New information appeared on the screen: organizational charts, financial networks, communication intercepts. We disrupt their coordination, she said. They're working together, which is their strength, but also their vulnerability. They don't trust each other. They're cooperating because someone convinced them you're a threat that requires unified action. We make them question that cooperation. How? By feeding them information that makes them suspect each other. By creating incidents that look like betrayals. By making the cost of cooperation higher than the benefit. Alara looked at Adrian. This is what I do, but I can't do it without your resources and your knowledge of these organizations. You need me, Adrian said. I need your network, your connections, and your operational capability. Yes. In exchange for what? Your survival. Adrian almost laughed. That's it? You save my empire and ask for nothing? I'm asking for your cooperation on this specific situation. After it's resolved, we return to our previous arrangement. Separate operations, minimal contact. Why don't I believe you? Alara tilted her head slightly. Because you assume everyone operates like you do, always calculating advantage, always looking for leverage. But I'm not everyone. Carrington cleared his throat. Ms. Sorrell, if I may, Mr. Volkov, what she's not telling you is that preventing your organization's collapse serves larger strategic purposes. Your territories currently function as buffers between worse actors. Your removal would allow those actors to expand into regions where they'd cause significantly more damage than you do. So, yes, she's protecting you. But she's also protecting about 12 million civilians who would suffer under regimes worse than yours. Adrian looked at Alara. Is that true? David tends to be more blunt than necessary, but yes. Your empire, despite its criminal nature, maintains a certain order. Order is preferable to chaos. So I'm the lesser evil. You're the stable evil, Alara corrected. There's a difference. Adrian walked to the map, studying the red markers. 6 months of planning, multiple organizations coordinating, intelligence operations feeding law enforcement. This was sophisticated, well-funded, and designed to destroy him completely. And Alara had been fighting it alone for 3 months without telling him. What do you need from me? He asked. Information about internal operations that only you have access to. Coordination with your field teams. Authorization to make certain moves on your behalf. And trust that I'm not using this situation to take control of your organization. That last one's the hardest. I know. But consider this. If I wanted to take control of your empire, I could have let this coordinated assault continue while positioning myself as the stabilizing force that fills the vacuum after your collapse. The fact that I'm preventing your collapse should indicate my intentions. Adrian turned to face her. Why do you care about stability so much? Alara was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, not soft, but less armored. Because I've seen what instability does. I've worked in regions where governments failed and warlords took over. I've watched civilians starve because supply chains collapsed and no one cared enough to rebuild them. I've seen children turned into soldiers because chaos creates opportunities for the worst humans imaginable. Stability isn't perfect. It's often maintained by violence and corruption, but it's better than the alternative. You sound like someone with experience. I have extensive experience. That's all you need to know. Adrian studied her face, looking for cracks in the armor, finding none. All right, tell me what you need. Over the next 2 hours, they planned. Alara laid out a strategy that was surgical in its precision. Targeted information leaks that would make the coordinating organizations suspect each other, financial disruptions that would strain their cooperation, staged incidents that would look like betrayals. Adrian provided intelligence about his own operations, details about security protocols, access to communication channels. Things he'd never shared with anyone outside his innermost circle. Carrington coordinated logistics, connecting Alara's intelligence network with Adrian's operational resources. By noon, they had a plan that would take 6 weeks to execute and required perfect timing. "One more thing," Alara said as they were finishing. "You need to change your security chief." Adrian froze. "Marcus? He's been with me for 12 years. He's also been feeding information to the Sinaloa cartel's European operations for the past 4 months." "That's impossible." Alara touched her screen, and a new window appeared. Communication records, financial transfers, meeting logs. Evidence that Marcus had been compromised. Adrian felt rage building. "I'll kill him." "No, you won't," Alara said, "because if you kill him, the cartel knows we've discovered their intelligence source. Instead, you're going to feed him false information that will make the cartel's planning worthless. He becomes an asset instead of a threat." Adrian stared at the evidence of his security chief's betrayal. 12 years. He'd trusted Marcus with his life. "How did you find this?" he asked quietly. "I monitor communication patterns across multiple organizations. When someone in your inner circle started having contact with known cartel operatives, it raised flags. I investigated." "When?" 2 weeks ago. I've been monitoring since then to understand the full extent of the compromise." You found this 2 weeks ago and didn't tell me." "I needed to understand the complete picture before exposing it. Partial information causes more damage than helpful action." Adrian closed his eyes. 2 weeks. She'd known for 2 weeks that someone in his inner circle had betrayed him, and she'd said nothing. Just watched, monitored, waited for the complete picture. "You should have told me immediately," he said. "So you could what? Confront him in anger? Kill him in rage? Create a visible security breach that would alert all your enemies to your vulnerability?" Alara's voice was sharp now. "This is the difference between us, Adrian. You react. I plan. You solve immediate problems. I solve root causes. You don't trust me to handle my own security. I don't trust anyone to handle situations optimally when they're emotionally compromised. And you would have been compromised. 12 years of trust, shattered by betrayal. You would have reacted violently and destroyed valuable intelligence opportunities." She wasn't wrong. Adrian knew she wasn't wrong. But it still felt like she'd treated him like a child who couldn't be trusted with adult information. "Going forward," he said carefully, "if you discover threats to my organization, you tell me. Immediately. I don't care about your strategic timing. These are my people, my operations, my life. I get to know when they're at risk." Alara regarded him for a long moment, then nodded. "Agreed, with one condition." "What?" "You don't act on the information without consulting me first. I tell you immediately. You give me time to provide full analysis before taking action." "That's not how I—" "That's the condition. Take it, or we return to me managing these situations without your knowledge." Adrian's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed against agreeing to this, against giving anyone, even Alara, veto power over his responses to threats. But she'd been right about Marcus. She'd been right about Prague. She'd been right about the Bratva situation. She'd been right about everything. "Fine," he said, "but this goes both ways. If something threatens your operations, you tell me. I might have resources you need." Alara's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe. "Why would you want to protect my operations?" "Because whether you admit it or not, we're connected now. Your stability depends partially on my empire. My survival apparently depends on your interventions. That makes us partners." "We're not partners." "Then what are we?" Alara didn't answer immediately. She turned back to the map, studying the red markers like they held answers to questions she hadn't asked yet. "We're two people trying to survive in a world that wants to destroy what we've built," she finally said. "That's all?" "That's not nothing." "No, it's not nothing." Carrington cleared his throat again. "If you two are finished with whatever this is, we have work to do. Mr. Volkov, I'll need access to your communication systems within the next 48 hours. Ms. Sorel, the Prague intelligence needs updating before we move to Phase 2. Alara nodded. "I'll have updated reports by tonight." Adrian looked at his watch. "I have meetings in 3 hours. We'll need to continue this tomorrow." "Same time, same place," Alara said. As Adrian moved toward the elevator, he stopped, turned back. Alara. She looked up. Thank you for stopping this before I knew it was happening. Something crossed her face, emotion maybe, though it was gone too fast to identify. It's what I do. It's more than that. Don't make this complicated, Adrian. We have work to do and limited time to do it. The elevator doors closed before he could respond. The plan unraveled on day 12. Adrian was in Moscow, meeting with suppliers who controlled shipping routes through the Baltic, when Carrington called with the kind of voice that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. We have a problem. The Bratva knows we're interfering. Adrian stepped away from the restaurant table into a private alcove where his security team had already swept for listening devices. How? Someone leaked information about our operation. Not sure who yet, but the Bratva pulled out of the coordinated assault 3 hours ago. They're repositioning. Repositioning where? That's the problem. We don't know. They've gone dark. Complete communication blackout. Ms. Sorel's network can't get a read on their movements. Adrian felt ice in his veins. Where is Alara? Geneva. Meeting with WHO representatives about some medical crisis in Morocco. I've been trying to reach her for the past hour. She's not responding. That was wrong. Alara always responded. Always. Even when she was managing crises that involved armed militants and collapsed governments, she responded within minutes. Send me her last known location, Adrian said. Exact coordinates. Mr. Volkov, I don't think... Send them. Now. Carrington hesitated, then Adrian's phone buzzed with the information. A hotel in Geneva's financial district. The Beau Rivage. Room 847. Adrian turned back to the table where 3 Russian suppliers sat waiting. Men who controlled access to ports that moved 60% of Adrian's Eastern European cargo. We're done, Adrian said in Russian. My people will contact you tomorrow with final terms. The lead supplier, a man named Grigor, who had a scar that ran from his eye to his jaw, frowned. We haven't finished negotiating. We have now. Accept my terms or find another partner. You have 12 hours to decide. Adrian walked out before they could respond. His security team fell in around him as he headed for the exit. Mikhail appeared at his shoulder. Boss, what's happening? Get the plane ready. We're going to Geneva. Geneva? We have the Berlin meeting in 6 hours. Cancel it. Cancel everything. We're going to Geneva right now. Mikhail knew better than to argue when Adrian used that tone. I'll have us wheels up in 30 minutes. Adrian made it in 25. During the flight, he tried Alara's number 6 times. Straight to voicemail every time. He tried Carrington again. Any updates? None. Her security detail isn't responding either. That's 3 people who've gone dark simultaneously. You think something happened to them? I think we're facing a situation we didn't anticipate. The Bratva going dark, Alara going silent, your operation being exposed. These aren't coincidences. Someone's making a move. Someone already made it. We're just catching up. The plane landed in Geneva at 11 p.m. local time. Adrian had 3 SUVs waiting, all armored, all staffed with security personnel who'd been pulled from other assignments across Europe. The Beau Rivage was the kind of hotel where diplomats stayed when they wanted privacy, and billionaires went when they wanted discretion. Adrian walked through the lobby like he owned it, his security team creating a bubble around him that made other guests step aside. The desk clerk tried to stop him. Sir, I'm afraid I can't give out guest information. Adrian placed a stack of Swiss francs on the counter, enough to buy a small car. Room 847? Is the guest still checked in? The clerk glanced at the money, at Adrian's face, at the 6 very large men standing behind him, made a calculation. The guest checked in 2 days ago, has not checked out. We have no record of her leaving the premises. Security footage. Sir, I really can't. Adrian added more francs to the stack. Security footage from the 8th floor, last 6 hours. The clerk's fingers trembled slightly as he typed into his computer. There's been no activity on the 8th floor since 8 p.m., no one entering or leaving the hallway. That's impossible. Someone has to use that hallway to access those rooms. I'm only telling you what the system shows. Adrian leaned across the counter. Your system is wrong or your security is compromised. Either way, I'm going to that room. You can call the police if you want, but by the time they arrive, I'll already be gone. He didn't wait for a response, just turned and headed for the elevators. The 8th floor was silent. Luxury hotels had that quality, sound dampening that made everything feel like it was happening underwater. Adrian's footsteps were muffled by carpet that probably cost more per square foot than some people earned in a month. Room 847 was at the end of the hallway. Adrian knocked. No response. Knocked again, harder. "Alara, it's Adrian. Open the door." Silence. He tried the handle. Locked. He looked at Mikhail, who already had a keycard programmer out, a device that cost a fortune on the black market and could open most hotel electronic locks in under 30 seconds. The lock clicked green. Adrian pushed the door open. The suite was pristine, no signs of struggle, no evidence of violence, but also no evidence of occupation. The bed was made. The bathroom was clean. Nothing was out of place. Except on the desk, centered perfectly, was Alara's phone. Adrian picked it up. The screen was black. Dead battery or powered off, he couldn't tell. He tried the power button. Nothing happened. "Boss," one of the security team called from the bedroom. "You need to see this." Adrian walked into the bedroom. The guard was pointing at the wall behind the bed. At first, Adrian didn't see anything unusual, just expensive wallpaper in a neutral pattern. Then he noticed it. A section of wallpaper that didn't quite align. A seam that shouldn't exist. Adrian pressed against the wall. A panel swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. "Secret exit," Mikhail muttered. "These old hotels have them. Built during the war for VIPs who needed to disappear quickly." Adrian pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The passage was tight, clearly not designed for comfort, just functionality. He stepped inside. The passage led down. Stairs that descended into darkness, walls that felt like they were closing in. Adrian's security team followed, their own lights creating a constellation of beams in the narrow space. At the bottom, the passage opened into what looked like an old wine cellar. Stone walls, low ceiling, cold enough that Adrian could see his breath. And in the corner, tied to a chair with professional-grade restraints, was David Carrington. He was alive but unconscious. Blood on his face from what looked like a broken nose. His suit was torn, but he was breathing. "Get him loose," Adrian ordered. 2 security personnel moved forward with knives, cutting through the restraints. Carrington came to slowly, groaning, his eyes focused on Adrian with difficulty. "Volkov, you shouldn't be here. Where's Alara?" "Gone. They took her 2 hours ago. 4 men. Professional. I tried to stop them." He touched his face, wincing. "Obviously failed." "Who took her?" "I don't know. They knew about the passage, knew about her security protocols, knew exactly when to hit. This was planned." Adrian felt rage building like a physical force. The Bratva? Maybe. Or maybe whoever's coordinating all the groups. This feels bigger than just Russian organized crime. Adrian pulled out his phone and called a number he'd been given weeks ago. A number Alara had said was for emergencies only. A woman answered on the first ring. "Yes." "This is Adrian Volkov. Alara's been taken. Geneva, I need whatever resources you have mobilized now." "Mr. Volkov, I don't take orders from you." "I'm not giving orders. I'm telling you that someone kidnapped your boss, and if we don't move fast, she's dead. Now, are you going to help, or are you going to waste time establishing authority?" A pause. Then, "Where exactly in Geneva?" Adrian gave her the location, the details, everything he knew. The woman, she'd never given a name, listened without interrupting. "I'll have a team there in 20 minutes, she said. "Don't do anything stupid before then." She hung up. Adrian looked at Carrington, who was being helped to his feet by the security team. "Can you walk?" "Can I walk?" "Volkov, I can barely see straight, but yes, I can walk. Where are we going?" "To find out who's stupid enough to kidnap my wife." They made it back to the hotel room just as Alara's team arrived. 3 people, 2 men and a woman, all dressed in dark clothing that was expensive but nondescript. The kind of outfit that said professional without specifying what profession. The woman who'd answered the phone wasn't with them. The team leader was a man in his 40s with a German accent and eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. "I'm Klaus, Ms. Sorrell's chief of security. You must be the husband." "Adrian Volkov, where is she?" "We're working on that. Our tracking systems show her last known location was this hotel, But after that, nothing. They're blocking our signals somehow. They knew about your tracking systems, which means someone on the inside is compromised, someone with access to our operational security. Adrian felt that information settle like a weight. You have a mole. Possibly. Or they have surveillance capabilities we haven't accounted for. Klaus turned to his team. Run the protocols. Every contact Alara made in the past 48 hours. Every location she visited. Every communication she sent. Something will give us a direction. The team moved efficiently, pulling out equipment that looked more advanced than anything Adrian had seen outside military operations. Laptops, signal analyzers, devices he couldn't identify. Adrian's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Mr. Volkov. A man's voice, accented, Eastern European, possibly Ukrainian. I believe you're looking for someone. Adrian's hand tightened around the phone. Who is this? Someone who has something you want, or rather, someone you've recently realized you want. If you've hurt her, please. We're professionals. Miss Sorrell is unharmed. For now. Whether she stays that way depends on you. What do you want? A conversation, face to face, you and me. No security teams, no weapons, just two businessmen discussing a mutually beneficial arrangement. I don't make deals with people who kidnap. Then Miss Sorrell dies. And you lose the only person who's been keeping your empire from collapsing. Your choice, Mr. Volkov. You have 2 hours to decide. I'll send coordinates. Come alone or don't come at all. The line went dead. Adrian stared at his phone. Klaus was watching him. Who was that? Klaus asked. Someone who wants a meeting. You're not actually considering going. She's my wife. She's also one of the most valuable assets in global security infrastructure. If they're using her as bait to get to you, they're planning something larger than a kidnapping. I don't care. You should care. Miss Sorrell would care. She'd tell you this is obviously a trap. Then I'll walk into the trap. What's your alternative? Wait while your tracking systems try to find signals they're blocking? Hope they decide to release her out of goodness that doesn't exist? Klaus was quiet for a moment. If you go with contingencies. We track you. We position teams near the location. We prepare for extraction. He said, come alone. You will be alone. You just won't be unsupported. Adrian's phone buzzed. Coordinates. An abandoned warehouse district on the outskirts of Geneva. The kind of place where bad things happened and no one asked questions. I know that area, Mikhail said, looking at the coordinates over Adrian's shoulder. Industrial zone. Mostly empty since the economic collapse 10 years ago. No civilians, no witnesses. Perfect place for a trap, Klaus added. Or a meeting between people who want privacy. Adrian checked his watch. 90 minutes until the deadline. I'm going. Set up your contingencies if you want, but I'm going. Klaus nodded slowly. You care about her. She's my wife. That's not what I asked. Adrian met Klaus's eyes. Set up your contingencies. I leave in 30 minutes. The drive took 25 minutes through Geneva streets that were quiet at this hour. Adrian sat in the back of an armored SUV, alone except for the driver, one of Klaus's team who'd been briefed to drop Adrian at the coordinates and then pull back to a staging position half a mile away. You have comms, the driver said, handing Adrian an earpiece so small it was almost invisible. Klaus and his team will be listening. You get in trouble, we move. Don't try to be a hero. Heroes are for people who have better options, Adrian said, fitting the earpiece. The warehouse district looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic film. Empty buildings with broken windows. Streets cracked and overgrown with weeds. Graffiti covering walls that had once housed legitimate businesses. The SUV stopped at the coordinates. A warehouse that looked slightly less abandoned than the others. No broken windows, door that appeared functional. Adrian stepped out. The driver pulled away immediately, following the plan. Adrian walked to the warehouse door and pushed it open. Inside was a space that had been cleared recently. No debris. No evidence of abandonment. Just empty floor and industrial lighting that cast harsh shadows. And in the center of the space, sitting in a chair like she was attending a business meeting, was Alara. She was tied. Professionally, Adrian noted, restraints that immobilized without causing injury. But she was conscious, alert, And when her eyes met Adrian's, he saw calculation instead of fear. A man stepped from the shadows. Mid-50s, expensive suit that looked wrong in this environment, gray hair slicked back, face that belonged to someone who'd built empires and destroyed them. Mr. Volkov, thank you for coming. I'm Dmitry Kozlov. The name hit Adrian like a punch. Kozlov. Russian oligarch. Former KGB. Owner of shipping companies, oil fields, politicians. A man whose wealth made Adrian's empire look like a corner store. And according to intelligence reports, dead for the past 3 years. You're supposed to be dead, Adrian said. I am dead. Officially. It's been remarkably convenient. Death provides freedom that life never could. Kozlov walked toward Alara, stopping behind her chair. Do you know what your wife cost me, Mr. Volkov? I don't care. $2 billion. A shipping network that took 15 years to build. Political connections that stretched from Moscow to Brussels. All gone because Ms. Sorrell here decided my operations were destabilizing Eastern European supply chains. Adrian looked at Alara. She met his gaze without expression. She destroyed me, Kozlov continued. Systematically, efficiently. I didn't even realize it was her until I was already ruined. I spent 2 years figuring out who'd done it, another year planning my response. You orchestrated the attack on my organization. I coordinated it? Yes. 7 different criminal organizations, all with their own grudges against you. It wasn't difficult to convince them to work together. Your reputation makes enemies easily, Mr. Volkov. What do you want? What I lost. My shipping network restored, my political connections reinstated, my wealth returned. All of which your wife is going to arrange for me. Alara's voice cut through the warehouse, calm and precise. I'm not arranging anything for you, Dmitry. You were trafficking weapons to terrorist organizations and smuggling enriched uranium through civilian shipping routes. Your network needed to be destroyed. That's a matter of perspective. That's a matter of fact. You were endangering millions of people for profit. Kozlov's expression hardened. I was building an empire, just like Mr. Volkov here, just like everyone in our world. But you decided I was too dangerous. You decided I needed to be stopped. Who gave you that authority? Reality gave me that authority. Someone had to stop you. No one else was going to. So you appointed yourself judge and executioner. I appointed myself solution to a problem. And I'd do it again. Kozlov pulled a gun from his jacket, not pointed at Alara, pointed at Adrian. Then let's see how committed you are to your principles. You have 2 choices, Ms. Sorrell. Restore what you took from me, or I kill your husband. You have 60 seconds to decide. Adrian heard Klaus's voice in his earpiece. We're moving. Hold position. But they wouldn't get here in time. Adrian could see that in Kozlov's eyes. This man had already decided how this ended. Don't give him anything, Adrian said to Alara. Adrian, you were right to destroy his network. Whatever he's building now will be worse. Don't compromise that. Alara's expression cracked slightly, the first real emotion Adrian had seen from her. You're asking me to let you die. I'm asking you to do your job. Stability over individuals. Isn't that what you said? That's not... Her voice broke slightly. That's not the same thing. 45 seconds, Kozlov said. Adrian, don't be stupid. I can rebuild what he wants. It's not worth your life. Yes, it is. Because if you give him what he wants, you compromise your entire operation. Everyone you've helped, everything you've built. I'm not worth that. You don't get to decide what you're worth to me. The words hung in the air. Kozlov smiled. How touching. The invisible wife actually cares about her husband. I didn't think you were capable of caring about anything except your precious stability. 30 seconds, Kozlov continued. What's it going to be, Ms. Sorrell? Your principles or your husband? Alara looked at Adrian. For the first time since he'd met her, he saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. Not for herself. For him. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Don't be. You made the world safer. That's more than most people can say. 20 seconds. Adrian heard movement outside. Klaus's team, probably. But they were too far away. This was going to end before they could intervene. I need you to know something, Alara said, her voice urgent now. The past 3 years, I didn't hate being married to you. I just didn't know how to. I'm not good at connections, at people, at anything that isn't solving problems. I know. But you were never invisible to me. You were just dangerous. Dangerous? Because you made me want things I'd trained myself not to want. 10 seconds. Kozlov raised the gun, aiming directly at Adrian's chest. Final chance, Ms. Sorel. Wait, Ilara said. Wait. I'll do it. I'll restore your network. Just don't kill him. Ilara, no, son. Shut up, Adrian. I'm not letting you die because of my choices. I destroyed Kozlov's network. That consequence is mine to bear. Kozlov smiled, but he didn't lower the gun. I was hoping you'd say that, but here's the problem. I don't actually believe you. I'm giving you what you want. You're giving me words, and your words have cost too many people too much. I need a better guarantee. What kind of guarantee? The kind where you watch me kill your husband and then spend the rest of your life knowing his death was the price of your interference. That's a lesson that sticks. Ilara's face went white. That wasn't the deal. There was never a deal. This was always about making you pay. The network can be rebuilt. But you need to learn that actions have consequences. Adrian saw Kozlov's finger tighten on the trigger. And then two things happened simultaneously. The warehouse lights went out, plunging everything into darkness. And someone tackled Adrian to the ground just as the gun fired. The shot echoed through the warehouse. Adrian felt the bullet pass so close to his head he could feel the displacement of air. Then he was rolling, hands pulling him, voices shouting commands in German and Russian. More shots. Muzzle flashes in the darkness. The sound of impact. Body against body, fist against flesh. Emergency lighting kicked in, dim and red. Adrian saw Klaus's team engaging with Kozlov's people. There had been others hidden in the shadows, Adrian realized. This had been a setup from the beginning, but Kozlov was gone. And Ilara. Adrian saw her, still tied to the chair. Klaus was cutting her restraints with a knife, moving with professional efficiency. "We need to move," Klaus shouted. "Now!" But Adrian was looking at the floor, at the blood pooling near where Kozlov had been standing. Someone had been hit in the firefight. "Boss!" Mikhail appeared beside him, pulling him toward the exit. "We need to go. This place is going to be swarming with police in minutes." Adrian let himself be pulled, but his eyes stayed on Ilara. She was free now, standing, checking herself for injuries. Klaus was speaking to her urgently, pointing toward a different exit. Their eyes met across the warehouse. She mouthed something. Adrian couldn't hear it over the chaos, but he could read her lips. "Thank you." Then Klaus's team was pulling her one direction while Mikhail pulled Adrian another. Protocol. Different extraction routes to avoid capturing both principals if they were intercepted. Adrian ended up in a different SUV, racing through Geneva streets while sirens wailed in the distance. His heart was hammering. His hands were shaking. Adrenaline crash, he recognized distantly. "Where's Ilara?" he asked Mikhail. "Klaus has her. They're taking a different route back to the safe house. Standard procedure. I need to see her." "You will. In about 30 minutes. First, we make sure we weren't followed." The safe house turned out to be an apartment in Geneva's old town. Expensive, anonymous. The kind of place that existed specifically for situations like this. Adrian burst through the door. Klaus's team was there, securing the perimeter. And in the center of the room, standing by the window, was Ilara. She turned when he entered. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened, clearly not used to physical contact, clearly not sure how to respond. But then her arms came up, slowly, and wrapped around him. They stood like that for a long time. Long enough that Klaus cleared his throat and gestured for his team to give them privacy. When they finally pulled apart, Ilara's face was composed again. But something in her eyes had changed. "You almost died," she said. "You almost compromised everything you've built." "I was going to. If he'd actually killed you, I would have given him whatever he wanted." "That's not rational." "No, it's not." She looked away. "I don't know what that means." Adrian touched her face, turning her back toward him. "It means you're human. It means you care about something other than problems and solutions." "I've always been human, Adrian. I've just been better at controlling it than most people." "What changed?" You nearly died because of my choices. That's not acceptable.
Alara,
I destroyed Kozlov's network because it was the right thing to do. I'd do it again, but I can't. She stopped, struggling with words in a way Adrian had never seen. I can't lose people because of my decisions. I've spent years making choices that affect millions. I've prevented wars. I've saved lives. I've done terrible things for good reasons. But it's always been abstract. Numbers, statistics, outcomes. And now? Now it's you. Someone I actually know. Someone I actually... She stopped again, took a breath. Someone I don't want to lose. Adrian felt something shift in his chest. You care about me. Apparently, against my better judgment, against every strategic calculation I've made. You're dangerous, Adrian, not because of your empire or your reputation, because you make me care about things I've spent years training myself not to care about. That's not weakness. It feels like weakness. It's not. Adrian pulled her close again. It's the only thing that makes any of this bearable. The power, the empires, the constant fighting. It's empty without someone who actually matters. Alara rested her head against his chest. I'm not good at this. At connections, at relationships, at being someone's wife in any way that actually means something. Neither am I. I brought another woman to that gala. I've spent 3 years treating you like furniture. We're both terrible at this. She laughed, actually laughed, a short, surprise sound. That's probably the most honest thing you've ever said to me. So maybe we start over, not as a contract, not as strategic positioning, as two people who are both dangerous and complicated and bad at being human, but trying anyway. Alara pulled back to look at him. What would that even look like? I have no idea, but probably better than what we've been doing. She studied his face like she was trying to solve a particularly complex equation. Then she nodded. All right, we try. But I'm not giving up my network or my operations. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to let me be part of your life in ways that actually matter. That might be more dangerous than letting me work alone. Everything worth having is dangerous. Alara's lips curved into something that was almost a smile. You're learning. Klaus knocked on the door. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem. Kozlov survived the firefight. He's in the wind, and he knows we're here. Adrian felt Alara shift back into operational mode, her posture straightening, her expression clearing. Where's the nearest extraction point? 3 blocks, but we need to move in the next 10 minutes. Swiss police are locking down the area. Alara nodded. Get everyone ready. We leave in 5. Klaus disappeared. Alara turned back to Adrian. This conversation isn't finished. No, but we have time to finish it later. Do we? Kozlov wants both of us dead now. That's not a small problem. Then we handle it. Together. That's what partners do. Alara looked at him for a long moment. Then she held out her hand. Partners. Adrian took it. Partners. They left the safe house in 2 separate vehicles again. Protocol, Klaus insisted, even though both Adrian and Alara argued against it. The convoy moved through Geneva's streets, avoiding main roads, using routes that Klaus's team had scouted in advance. Adrian's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but Alara was on the same call. Klaus had patched them through secure channels. Answer it, Alara said through the comm. I want to know what Kozlov wants now. Adrian answered. Kozlov. Mr. Volkov. That was exciting, wasn't it? Your wife's security team is more competent than I expected. What do you want? I want you to understand that this isn't over. Your wife destroyed my life. I'm going to destroy hers. And that means destroying you, since apparently you've become something she values. I have resources you can't imagine. I have patience you don't possess. And I have nothing left to lose. Neither do I. That's where you're wrong. You have everything to lose. Your empire, your life, your wife. I'm going to take them all, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but rubble and regret. The line went dead. Well, Alara's voice came through the comm. That's definitely a problem. Any suggestions? Adrian asked. Several. None of them pleasant. I'm listening. We stop running. We stop reacting. We stop letting Kozlov dictate terms. And we do what I should have done 3 years ago when I destroyed his network. What's that? We finish the job. They regrouped in Paris 48 hours later. Not at a safe house this time. Alara had decided safe houses were predictable, and predictable meant vulnerable. Instead, they met at a private estate outside the city that belonged to someone Alara called a friend who owes me. Adrian didn't ask for details. He was learning that Alara's network of favors and debts stretched farther than he'd imagined. The estate was old money, 17th century stone, gardens that looked like paintings, the kind of wealth that whispered instead of shouted. Inside the main house, Alara had converted a dining room into an operations center. Laptops, secure phones, maps covering the walls. Klaus and his team occupied one side. Adrian's people, Mikhail and 3 others he trusted absolutely, occupied the other. And in the center, Alara and Adrian stood over a table covered with intelligence reports about Dmitry Kozlov. He's been hiding in Belarus, Alara said, pointing to a location on the map. Protected by government officials he's been paying for years. We can't touch him there. Too many political complications. So we draw him out, Adrian said. With what? He's not stupid. He won't come for bait he recognizes. Then we don't use bait he recognizes. Adrian looked at Carrington, who'd arrived that morning with a bandage still covering his broken nose. You said Kozlov's coordinating 7 criminal organizations against me. What if those organizations suddenly turned on each other? Carrington leaned forward. You want to break the coalition. I want to destroy it. Make them think one of them betrayed the others. Let them tear each other apart while we focus on Kozlov. Alara was quiet, studying the map. Then she nodded slowly. It could work, but it would require perfect timing and information they'd actually believe. We'd need to manufacture evidence of betrayal convincing enough that organizations who already don't trust each other would accept it without question. Can you do that? Yes, but it'll be messy. People will die. Probably a lot of people. Adrian met her eyes. You've spent 3 years preventing deaths. I've spent 20 years causing them. This is my kind of problem. Let me handle the messy part. Adrian, you said we're partners. Partners use their strengths. Your strength is prevention and stability. Mine is controlled destruction. Let me do what I'm good at. Alara looked like she wanted to argue, but then something shifted in her expression. Acceptance, maybe, or just exhaustion. Fine, but we do it carefully. No unnecessary casualties, no collateral damage that creates bigger problems than it solves. Agreed. Over the next 3 days, they built a plan that was equal parts brilliant and brutal. Adrian would use his network to plant evidence that the Sinaloa cartel's European operations had been feeding information to law enforcement about the other 6 organizations. Financial records showing payments from DEA accounts. Recorded conversations, fabricated but believable, of cartel members discussing cooperation with authorities. Intercepted communications that suggested the cartel was planning to eliminate their temporary allies once Adrian's empire fell. Meanwhile, Alara's network would ensure that evidence reached the right people at exactly the right time, not all at once. That would look suspicious. But in carefully timed leaks that would build a narrative of betrayal impossible to ignore. The cartel will deny it, Klaus said, reviewing the plan. They'll know it's fake. They'll deny it to the other organizations, Adrian agreed. But the other organizations won't believe them. That's how these groups work. Trust is already minimal. This just gives them permission to act on their existing paranoia. And while they're fighting each other? Alara asked. We go after Kozlov. He can't coordinate a coalition that's tearing itself apart. His protection in Belarus becomes irrelevant when he doesn't have a coalition to protect. He'll run, Carrington pointed out. The moment his coalition falls apart, he'll disappear. Then we make sure he has nowhere to run. Alara pulled up a different screen. Financial networks, shell companies, bank accounts. Kozlov's wealth is distributed across 47 different accounts in 16 countries, most of it hidden behind corporate structures that would take years to untangle legally. But if we freeze those accounts simultaneously, all at once, he suddenly has no resources. You can freeze accounts in 16 countries simultaneously? Mikhail asked. I can do a lot of things when I need to. Alara looked at Adrian. But this is where it gets complicated. To freeze those accounts, I'll need to call in favors from people I've been keeping in reserve for emergencies. Government officials, banking executives, intelligence operatives, Once I use those favors, they're gone. I won't get them back. Is this worth it? Adrian asked. You're asking if you're worth it. I'm asking if stopping Kozlov is worth burning resources you might need for other crises. Alara studied him for a moment. Then she reached across the table and took his hand, a gesture so uncharacteristic that everyone in the room tried not to stare. Yes, she said simply, this is worth it. They executed Phase 1 on a Thursday. Adrian's people planted the first piece of evidence, a financial record showing a payment from a DEA account to a known cartel lieutenant. The record was discovered by Albanian networks during a routine intelligence sweep. Phase 2 came 36 hours later. Recorded conversations, fabricated by Alara's people using voice synthesis technology that was frankly terrifying in its accuracy, surfaced in Yakuza communication channels. The conversation showed cartel members discussing how to eliminate their coalition partners once Adrian's empire fell. Phase 3 was the most dangerous. Adrian's people staged an attack on a Bratva shipment, made it look like the cartel was responsible. 3 Bratva soldiers died in the attack. Casualties Adrian regretted but accepted as necessary. The violence was designed to be just severe enough that the Bratva would demand retribution. By Sunday, the coalition was fracturing. The Bratva and the cartel were already exchanging threats. The Albanian networks had pulled out entirely, deciding the whole situation was too unstable. The Yakuza were hedging, waiting to see which side looked stronger before committing resources. And Dmitry Kozlov, according to Alara's intelligence networks, was in full panic mode. He's making calls, Klaus reported Monday morning, trying to hold the coalition together. But no one's listening. They're too busy preparing for war with each other. Where is he now? Adrian asked. Still in Belarus, but he's preparing to move. Our sources say he's arranged transport to Moscow by the end of the week. He can't get to Moscow, Alara said. Once he's there, he'll have protection we can't penetrate. Russian government officials who still owe him favors. Security infrastructure we can't compromise. Then we move before he moves. Adrian looked at the map, at the route between Belarus and Moscow. How's he traveling? Private plane, small airfield outside Minsk. He'll drive from his compound to the airfield, then fly directly to Moscow. Probably thinks he'll be safer in the air than on the roads. Adrian smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Then we make sure the air isn't safe. Alara's eyes narrowed. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that private planes require maintenance, and maintenance requires mechanics. And mechanics can be persuaded to find problems that ground aircraft. You want to sabotage his plane. I want to keep him on the ground long enough for us to reach him. That's risky. If we ground his plane and don't reach him in time, he'll just arrange alternate transport. So we make sure we reach him in time. Adrian looked at his team. We go to Belarus. We position ourselves near the airfield. And when his plane can't take off, we're already there. Klaus shook his head. That's a terrible plan. Belarus isn't friendly territory. We'll be operating in a country where Kozlov has government protection. If anything goes wrong, we die. But if we don't do this, Kozlov reaches Moscow and we lose our chance. I'd rather die trying than live knowing we let him escape. Everyone looked at Alara. She was the one who made final decisions on operations. Her network, her resources, her call. She studied the map for a long moment, then nodded. We do it, but we do it smart. Small team, maximum mobility. We get in, intercept Kozlov, and get out before Belarusian security realizes what happened. You're not coming, Adrian said. Excuse me? This is the dangerous part. The part where people get shot. You don't need to be there. Alara's expression went cold. Adrian, I've been operating in war zones for 15 years. I've extracted hostages from militant compounds. I've negotiated with warlords while their soldiers pointed guns at my head. I've survived situations that would have killed most of your security team. So when I say I'm coming, I'm not asking permission. Adrian felt his jaw tighten. Every instinct told him to keep her safe, to keep her away from the violence that was about to happen. But he was learning that Alara wasn't someone who could be kept safe. She was someone who ran toward danger because danger was where her skills were needed. Fine, he said, but you stay with Klaus's security team. You don't engage unless absolutely necessary. I'll do what the situation requires, same as always. They left for Belarus that night. Small team, like Ilara had said, just Klaus, Mikhail, two of Adrian's best operatives, and Carrington, who'd insisted on coming despite his injuries, plus Adrian and Ilara. The drive from the Polish border to the airfield outside Minsk took 6 hours. They traveled in 2 vehicles, both with diplomatic plates that would buy them time if they were stopped but wouldn't protect them if Belarusian security decided to dig deeper. They reached the airfield at dawn. It was small, 2 runways, a handful of hangars, the kind of place where wealthy people kept private aircraft and asked minimal questions about flight plans. Kozlov's plane was in the 3rd hangar, a Gulfstream G-65. Oh, according to Klaus's intelligence, top-of-the-line aircraft, could fly from Minsk to Moscow in under 2 hours. Or could have, if Ilara's contacts hadn't already gotten to the maintenance crew. Hydraulic system failure, Klaus said, reading updates from his phone. The mechanics discovered it during pre-flight check. They're estimating 6 hours for repairs. 6 hours, Adrian repeated. That's our window. They positioned themselves in 2 locations. Klaus and his team took the southern approach to the airfield, the route Kozlov would use if he tried to leave by vehicle. Adrian, Mikhail, and Carrington took the northern approach, covering the hangar where Kozlov's plane was grounded. Ilara stayed in one of the vehicles, monitoring communications and coordinating with her network. She had access to satellite feeds, local police communications, even the airfield's security cameras. Nothing moved in or out of that airfield without her knowing. 3 hours passed. Then 4. Adrian was starting to wonder if Kozlov had somehow discovered their plan when Ilara's voice came through the comm. He's moving. 3 vehicles. Coming from his compound now. ETA to the airfield, 15 minutes. How many people with him? Adrian asked. Looks like 8, maybe 10. Hard to tell from satellite imagery. We're outnumbered. When has that ever stopped you? There was something in Ilara's voice, not quite humor, but close to it. Adrian checked his weapon. A pistol, suppressed. The kind of gun designed for close quarters and quiet work. Mikhail had a rifle. Carrington had his own pistol, plus enough tactical gear to supply a small army. Remember, Ilara said through the comm, we need Kozlov alive. He's more valuable to us if we can use him to completely dismantle his remaining network. Dead, he becomes a martyr. Alive and broken, he becomes a warning. Understood. The vehicles appeared 8 minutes later. 3 black SUVs, armored by the look of them. They pulled up to the hangar where Kozlov's plane sat disabled. Doors opened. Men emerged. Security personnel, professional grade. And finally, Kozlov himself. He looked older than the last time Adrian had seen him. Tired, paranoid. The kind of exhaustion that came from realizing your empire was crumbling and there was nothing you could do to stop it. Kozlov walked into the hangar, shouting at the mechanics in Russian, demanding to know why his plane wasn't ready, threatening consequences if they didn't fix it immediately. Adrian moved then. Not fast, not aggressive, just purposeful. He walked across the tarmac like he belonged there, like he was just another person working at the airfield. Mikhail flanked him from the left, Carrington from the right. They made it within 20 feet of the hangar before one of Kozlov's security team noticed them. Stop! Identify yourself. Adrian kept walking. Maintenance supervisor, your boss called about the plane. Stop now or I shoot. Adrian stopped, raised his hands slowly. Easy. Just here to talk about the repairs. The security guard approached, weapon raised. Behind him, Kozlov emerged from the hangar, squinting in the morning light. Their eyes met. Kozlov's face went white. You. Me, Adrian agreed. Then everything happened at once. The security guard lunged toward Adrian. Mikhail fired from the left. A shot that caught the guard in the shoulder, dropping him. More guards poured from the SUVs. Carrington engaged them with professional efficiency. His shots precise and controlled. Adrian ran toward Kozlov. The older man tried to retreat into the hangar, but Adrian was faster. He caught Kozlov by the jacket, slammed him against the hangar wall. You threatened my wife, Adrian said. You tried to destroy my empire. You kidnapped the one person I actually give a damn about. Those were mistakes. Kozlov's face twisted with rage and fear. You think this is over? You think killing me solves anything? I have contingencies. I have people who'll continue. I'm not going to kill you. Adrian interrupted. That would be too easy. He pulled Kozlov away from the wall, zip-tied his hands behind his back. Around them, Klaus's team had arrived, securing the scene. Kozlov's security personnel were either down or surrendering. The mechanics had fled. It was over in under 3 minutes. Ilara emerged from one of the vehicles. She walked toward Kozlov with that same measured pace she used for everything. No rush, no visible emotion, just purpose. Kozlov looked at her with something between hatred and fear. You destroyed everything I built. Yes, Ilara said simply. I did. Why? What gave you the right? You were trafficking weapons to organizations that kill civilians. You were smuggling nuclear material through shipping routes that pass through population centers. You were putting millions of people at risk for profit. That gave me the right. You're no better than me. You manipulate. You destroy. You interfere in things that aren't your business. I interfere in things that affect global stability. That's my business. And you, Dmitri, were the definition of instability. Kozlov spat at her feet. So what now? You kill me anyway? Make it look like an accident? No. Now we dismantle what's left of your network. You're going to tell us every contact, every shell company, every government official you've been bribing, every terrorist organization you've sold weapons to, every location where you've hidden resources, everything. I'll never. You will. Because if you don't, I'll make sure your daughter in Geneva knows exactly what you've been doing. I'll make sure she knows about the weapons trafficking, the uranium smuggling, the civilian casualties your operations have caused. She thinks you're dead, Dmitri. She thinks you died a hero, a businessman who was assassinated by rivals. What do you think happens to her memory of you when she learns the truth? Kozlov's face went gray. You wouldn't. I absolutely would. Your empire is already destroyed. Your wealth is already frozen. Your protection is already gone. The only thing you have left is your daughter's good memories of you. That's what I'm offering to preserve. Your daughter never has to know what you became. She can keep believing you were something noble. In exchange, you tell us everything. The calculation played out across Kozlov's face. Pride warring with pragmatism. Hatred fighting with love for a daughter who still thought he was someone worth remembering fondly. Fine, he said finally. Fine. I'll tell you everything, but not here. Somewhere safe. Nowhere is safe for you anymore, Ilara said, but I'll arrange somewhere comfortable. Klaus, get him in the vehicle. We're leaving before local authorities get curious. They extracted from Belarus the same way they'd entered. Fast, quiet, using routes that Ilara's network had identified as having minimal police presence. By the time Belarusian security realized something had happened at the airfield, they were already across the Polish border. They took Kozlov to a secure location Ilara maintained in Prague, an apartment that looked normal from the outside but was actually a black site where Ilara conducted interrogations and debriefings. Not torture. Ilara didn't do torture, but persistent professional questioning that broke people down through exhaustion and psychological pressure instead of violence. Over the next 72 hours, Kozlov told them everything. Names, locations, account numbers, passwords, communication protocols. Every detail of his network and the networks he'd been connected to. Ilara recorded it all, verified what could be verified, and built a complete map of an empire that had operated in shadows for decades. Adrian watched some of the interrogations, watched Ilara work with a precision that was almost surgical. She never raised her voice, never threatened, just asked questions with the kind of patience that wore people down until truth was easier than resistance. On the third day, Klaus approached Adrian outside the interrogation room. We have what we need. What do you want to do with him? Adrian looked through the one-way glass at Kozlov, who sat slumped in a chair looking 20 years older than he had a week ago, broken, defeated, everything stripped away until only exhaustion remained. What does Ilara want? Adrian asked. She says it's your call. He threatened your empire, kidnapped you, nearly killed you. She says you get to decide how this ends. Adrian thought about that. A week ago, he would have killed Kozlov without hesitation, would have seen it as simple justice. You threaten Adrian Volkov's empire, you die. Clean, final, message sent. But that was before Geneva, before watching Ilara almost compromise everything she'd built because she didn't want him dead, before understanding that some things mattered more than simple revenge. We let him go, Adrian said. Klaus stared at him. What? We take everything he's given us. Use it to dismantle every organization he's connected to, freeze every account he's identified, arrest every official he's been bribing, and then we let him go. Boss, that's insane. He'll come after you again. No, he won't, because we're going to make sure he understands that if he tries, Alara releases everything about him to his daughter, plus every intelligence agency in the world, plus every organization he's ever screwed over. He'll spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, knowing that attacking us means destroying the last good thing about his legacy. Klaus looked skeptical but nodded. I'll tell Ms. Sorel. When Adrian entered the interrogation room, Kozlov looked up with dull eyes. Come to finish it? Kozlov asked. No. Come to tell you you're free to go. Kozlov blinked. What? You heard me. We have everything we need from you. Your network is finished. Your resources are gone. You're irrelevant now, so you're free to go live whatever life you can build from the pieces you have left. You're just letting me go. With conditions. You never contact me or my wife again. You never operate in any territory connected to my organization. You never rebuild. You disappear completely. If you don't, everything you've told us, including details about what you've done, goes to your daughter, every intelligence agency that wants you, and every criminal organization you've betrayed. You'll spend the rest of your life running from people who want you dead. Kozlov stared at him. Why? Because killing you is easy. Letting you live knowing you've lost everything is harder. I want you to spend whatever time you have left understanding that you destroyed yourself. That your arrogance and your need for revenge cost you everything that mattered. That's a better punishment than death. Adrian turned and walked out, leaving Kozlov sitting alone in the interrogation room. Outside, Alara was waiting. That was unusually merciful for you. I'm learning from someone who understands that death isn't always the best solution. You think letting him live is mercy? I think it's justice. He has to live with what he's lost. That's worse than dying. Alara studied his face for a moment. Then she smiled, a real smile this time. Not the almost smile she usually offered. You really are learning. They stood there in the hallway, just looking at each other. Around them, Klaus's team was already processing everything Kozlov had given them, already coordinating with law enforcement and intelligence agencies, already dismantling what remained of networks that had operated for decades. We did it, Adrian said. We stopped him. We did it together, Alara corrected. You provided operational capability. I provided intelligence. Carrington provided coordination. Klaus provided security. It was a team effort. You're not used to team efforts. No, I'm not. But I'm learning that some problems are too big to solve alone. She reached out and took his hand. Thank you. For coming to Geneva. For walking into an obvious trap. For being willing to die rather than let me compromise my principles. Thank you for not letting me die. That was mostly Klaus's team. But it was your order. You could have let Kozlov kill me and avoided all this complication. Would have been strategically simpler. It would have been the worst decision I've ever made. Alara stepped closer. I told you in Geneva. You're dangerous to me. Not because of violence or power, because you make me want things I trained myself not to want. Like what? Like partnership, like connection, like someone who understands the cost of doing what we do and does it anyway. Adrian pulled her closer. So what happens now? Now we go home. Back to the mansion that's been more symbol than home for 3 years, and we figure out what our life looks like when it's actually shared instead of divided into separate wings. That's going to be complicated. Everything about us is complicated, but complicated doesn't mean impossible. Klaus cleared his throat from down the hallway. Sorry to interrupt, but we have confirmation. Kozlov's networks are falling apart. Law enforcement is making arrests in 8 countries. Financial accounts are being seized. It's over. Alara nodded. Let him go. Make sure he understands the terms Adrian laid out. Then close this location down. I want to go home. They flew back that evening, not on Adrian's private jet, on a commercial flight, first class but anonymous. Alara's preference. She didn't like drawing attention when she didn't have to. During the flight, Adrian watched her work. Laptop open, secure connection established, managing crises in 3 different countries simultaneously. A humanitarian situation in Yemen that required resource reallocation, a political crisis in Peru that needed subtle intervention, a corporate merger in Singapore that had security implications she needed to monitor. She did it all with the same calm precision she applied to everything else. But every 15 minutes or so, she'd look up from her laptop and meet Adrian's eyes, making sure he was still there, making sure this was real. They landed just after midnight. A car was waiting, one of Adrian's, driven by someone from his security team. The drive to the mansion took 40 minutes through empty streets. When they arrived, the house was dark except for security lights. They walked inside together, not separately to different wings, together through the front entrance into the main hall. "I've never actually seen most of this house," Alara admitted. "I've lived here 3 years, and I've only seen my wing and the occasional hallway." "Want a tour? At 1 in the morning?" "Why not? We're both awake. Might as well see what you've been missing." So Adrian showed her the house, the library he never used, the gym where he worked out when stress demanded physical outlet, the study where he'd spent that first night after the gala trying to understand who she was, the kitchen that had professional equipment and staff who appeared during the day but was empty now. They ended up in the East Wing, Alara's territory. Adrian had only been here once or twice in 3 years. Her space was different from his. Minimal, functional, a bedroom that looked more like a hotel than a home, an office that was all business, computers, secure phones, filing systems. No personal touches, no photographs or mementos, nothing that indicated anyone actually lived here. "This is depressing," Adrian said. "It's practical. It's a prison you built for yourself." Alara looked around the space like she was seeing it for the first time. "I never thought about it that way, but you're right. I've been living like I'm temporary, like I'm just passing through." "You are passing through. We both are. But that doesn't mean it has to look like a black site." "What would you suggest?" "I don't know. Things that matter to you? Things that remind you who you are when you're not solving global crises?" "I'm always solving global crises. That's who I am." "No, that's what you do. Who you are is something different." Alara sat on the edge of her bed, made with military precision, corners sharp enough to cut. "I don't know if I remember who I am outside of the work." Adrian sat beside her. "Then maybe we figure it out together. You learn to be someone who exists outside constant crisis management. I learn to be someone whose empire isn't the only thing that defines him. We both learn to be people who are together instead of just strategically positioned in the same space." "That sounds impossibly difficult." "Probably, but we're both good at difficult things." Alara leaned against him. A small gesture but meaningful for someone who'd spent years maintaining perfect control. "Where do we even start?" "Here. Now. No more separate wings, no more distance. We figure out what shared space actually means. My work requires privacy, secure communications, confidential information. So does mine. We'll figure out how to balance that. I'll still travel, sometimes for weeks. So will I. We'll figure that out too." Alara pulled back to look at him. "You're being remarkably optimistic for someone who spent 3 years not caring whether I existed." "I'm being optimistic because I just spent a week realizing what I almost lost. That changes perspective." "Does it? Or are you just caught up in the drama and the danger? What happens when things settle down, when we're not fighting for survival, when it's just normal life and complicated logistics?" Adrian didn't have an easy answer to that. She was right to question it. Drama and danger created intensity. But intensity wasn't the same as commitment. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe you're right. Maybe when things settle down, we'll realize this doesn't work. But I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been." Alara was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right, we try. But we try honestly. No pretending, no performing for each other. If this doesn't work, we acknowledge it instead of forcing something that was never going to be sustainable." "Deal." They sat there in her austere bedroom, both of them exhausted from days of violence and stress, both of them uncertain what came next. But for the first time in 3 years, they were sitting together instead of alone. That felt like progress. Alara's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then sighed. "Crisis in Libya. I need to make some calls." "At 2 in the morning?" "Crises don't respect time zones." "Will it take long?" "Maybe an hour, maybe 3. Depends on how cooperative people are." Adrian stood. "I'll let you work. I should check on my own organization anyway. Make sure the fallout from Kozlov's network collapse isn't creating problems we didn't anticipate. Alara caught his hand before he could leave. Adrian, thank you. For everything. For Geneva. For Belarus. For understanding that I need to do this work even when it's inconvenient. Thank you for letting me be part of it. She pulled him down and kissed him, quick but real. Then she released him and turned to her computer, already shifting back into operational mode. Adrian walked back to his wing, but it felt different now. Less like his territory and more like a temporary space they'd eventually merge into something shared. He spent 2 hours on calls with Mikhail and his other lieutenants, making sure the Prague operation was stable, that the coalition against him had completely fractured, that no new threats were emerging to replace the old ones. When he finally went to bed, he couldn't sleep. Too much adrenaline, too many thoughts. He lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had changed in the past 2 weeks. Around 4 in the morning, his door opened quietly. Alara stood in the doorway, backlit by hallway light. Finished with Libya? He asked. For now, crisis averted. At least until tomorrow when something else goes wrong. She hesitated. Can I stay here tonight? My room feels empty. Adrian pulled back the covers in answer. She crossed the room and climbed into bed beside him. Still dressed, still wearing the armor of professional distance. But she was here, in his space, making an effort towards something neither of them quite understood yet. They lay there in silence for a while. Then Alara spoke quietly. I lied earlier, about not knowing who I am outside the work. Yeah? I know exactly who I am. I'm someone who's terrified of connections because connections mean vulnerability. I'm someone who learned early that caring about people gives them power to hurt you. So I built walls and called them professionalism. I built distance and called it strategic positioning. I made myself valuable to everyone while meaning nothing to anyone. It was safe. And now? Now I've met someone who walked into a trap for me, who was willing to die rather than let me compromise my principles, who looks at me like I'm something other than a problem to be solved or a resource to be exploited. And I don't know what to do with that. Adrian turned on his side to face her. You don't have to do anything. Just be here. That's enough. What if I'm not good at this? At being someone's partner? At sharing space and making compromises and all the things relationships require? Then we'll both be bad at it together. I've spent 20 years building an empire instead of building connections. I've treated relationships as transactions. I've measured people's value by what they could do for me instead of who they were. We're both learning from scratch. Alara turned toward him, and in the dim light, he saw something vulnerable in her eyes. I don't want to fail at this. Then we won't. Or we will, and we'll figure it out anyway. But either way, we try. She moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. This is going to be impossible. Probably. We're going to make terrible mistakes. Definitely. We might destroy each other. Or we might build something neither of us could have built alone. Alara was quiet for a moment. Then, so softly, he almost didn't hear it. I'd like that. They fell asleep like that. 2 dangerous people trying to be something other than weapons. 2 empires learning to coexist instead of just occupy the same space. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise over the city Adrian controlled and the world Alara protected. Tomorrow would bring new crises, new challenges, new threats to manage. But for now, in this moment, they had something neither of them had expected to find. Each other. Morning came with problems. It always did. Adrian woke to find Alara already gone from bed, her side still warm but empty. He found her in what used to be her office, now relocated to a larger space they'd agreed to share. She was on a video call, speaking rapid French to someone who looked like they hadn't slept in days. The refugee situation is worsening, she was saying. I need those medical supplies rerouted through Malta instead of Greece. Yes, I understand the political complications. Handle them. She ended the call and looked up at Adrian. Molly, government collapse is creating a humanitarian crisis. I'm trying to get supplies in before the situation becomes completely unsalvageable. How bad is it? Bad enough that people will die if I don't fix it, but also bad enough that I can't fix it completely. Just minimize the damage. She rubbed her eyes. This is what I was trying to explain last night. My work doesn't stop. There's always another crisis. I know. Do you? Because most people say they understand, and then 3 months later they're angry that I'm never available, that I'm always managing problems in countries they can't find on a map, that I care more about strangers than I do about them. Adrian poured coffee from the pot she'd already brewed. I'm not most people. I run an empire that operates across 8 countries. I understand that power requires constant attention. The difference is my empire makes money. Yours saves lives. Some would argue your empire takes lives. Some would be right, but I'm trying to be better about that. Alara almost smiled. Better at not taking lives? Better at considering whether taking lives is actually necessary. You've made me think more about consequences. That's dangerous for someone in your position. Everything about you is dangerous for someone in my position. Before Alara could respond, both their phones buzzed simultaneously. Different alerts, but the timing was too coincidental. They looked at each other. You first, Adrian said. Mikhail says there's movement against your Prague operations. Someone's making a play for the territory you just secured. Adrian checked his own phone. Klaus. Alara's Libya operation just got compromised. Someone leaked information to local militias about supply routes. They stared at each other as understanding settled. Kozlov, they said simultaneously. I thought we broke him, Adrian said. I thought he understood the terms. We underestimated him, or overestimated his attachment to his daughter's good opinion. Alara was already pulling up screens tracking data streams. He's making one last move. Not to rebuild his empire. He knows that's impossible. This is pure revenge. He's attacking both of us simultaneously. To prove he can. To prove we didn't actually win. Alara's fingers flew across the keyboard. He's using remaining contacts we didn't know about. Resources he kept hidden even during the interrogation. This is his contingency plan. Adrian felt cold rage building. I gave him a chance. I let him walk away. And he's throwing it back in your face. Some people can't accept defeat. They'd rather die causing damage than live with the knowledge they lost. Adrian called Mikhail. Status on Prague. Under pressure, boss. 3 different groups moving on our territory simultaneously. This is coordinated. Professional. Someone with serious resources is backing them. Hold the territory. I'm sending reinforcements. And Mikhail? No mercy this time. Anyone making moves against us, you make an example. He hung up and looked at Alara. Your Libya situation? My people are already evacuating, but we'll lose 6 months of work. Medical supplies that were meant for civilians will be seized by militias. People who needed help won't get it. Her voice was tight with controlled fury. Kozlov knows exactly how to hurt me. He's not attacking my organization. He's attacking the people my organization helps. Can you rebuild? Eventually. But some of those people won't survive eventually. They need help now. Adrian watched her face, saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was running scenarios, measuring options, trying to find solutions to problems that didn't have good answers. We end this, he said. Today. No more mercy, no more strategic patience. We find Kozlov and we finish what we should have finished in Prague. You want to kill him? I want to eliminate a threat that won't stop until we're both destroyed. Yes. Alara was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right. But we do it clean. No collateral damage, no innocent casualties. We take out Kozlov and only Kozlov. Agreed. Where is he? Alara pulled up satellite imagery. According to my network, he left Prague 6 hours ago. He's moving east, probably trying to reach Russia again. Then we intercept him before he gets there. They mobilized within an hour. Klaus's team, Adrian's best operatives, everyone they could trust who wasn't already managing crises elsewhere. The plan was simple because complicated plans had too many failure points. They'd track Kozlov's route, identify the most vulnerable point, and intercept him there. The location ended up being a highway rest stop in eastern Poland, remote enough that civilians wouldn't be caught in crossfire, public enough that Kozlov would feel safe stopping there. Adrian and Alara traveled together this time, no separate vehicles, no divided approaches. They sat in the back of an armored SUV while Klaus drove and Mikhail rode shotgun, both literally and figuratively. This feels different, Alara said quietly. Different how? Every other operation. I've been calculating outcomes. measuring risks against benefits, trying to minimize damage while maximizing stability. But this is personal. I'm going after someone because he hurt my operations and threatened you. That's not strategic, that's emotional. Is that a problem? I don't know. I've spent 15 years not letting emotions drive decisions. Now I'm about to kill someone because I'm angry. That's a line I haven't crossed before. Adrian took her hand. You're not killing him because you're angry. You're eliminating him because he's proven he won't stop. Because letting him live was a strategic mistake that's causing damage we didn't anticipate. That's still calculation. Is it? Or am I just rationalizing revenge? Does it matter? Either way, he needs to be stopped. Alara looked out the window at the countryside passing by. It matters to me. I've always believed I was different from people like you, that I used violence as a last resort while you used it as a primary tool, but maybe I've just been lying to myself about what I'm capable of. Or maybe you're learning that sometimes last resorts are the only option left. That doesn't make you like me. It makes you pragmatic. They reached the rest stop 2 hours before Kozlov's estimated arrival. Klaus positioned his team in overlapping fields of fire. Adrian's people secured the perimeter. Everyone wore civilian clothes. Everything looked normal to anyone who happened to pass through. They waited. Adrian had done this before, the patient hunting of prey who didn't know they were being hunted. But usually he felt nothing except focus. This time he felt Alara's tension beside him, felt her wrestling with decisions that came easily to him but cost her something he was only beginning to understand. Last chance to change your mind, he said. About killing Kozlov. About any of this. You could stay in the car. Let me handle it. Alara looked at him with something sharp in her eyes. You think I can't handle this? I think you shouldn't have to. You spend your life saving people. You shouldn't have to be the one who ends them. That's naive, Adrian. You can't save everyone without being willing to stop the ones who make saving others impossible. I've known that for years. I've just never had to pull the trigger myself. There's a difference between knowing something intellectually and living with it after. Then I guess I'm about to learn what that difference feels like. Kozlov's vehicle appeared 30 minutes later. A single Mercedes, 2 occupants, Kozlov and a driver. Either he was traveling light or this was a decoy. Adrian's instincts said it was really him. Desperation made people careless. The Mercedes pulled into the rest stop, parked. The driver got out first, scanning the area with professional paranoia. Then Kozlov emerged, looking diminished somehow. Like the past week had aged him a decade. Klaus gave the signal. Adrian's people moved first, securing the driver before he could react. No shots fired. No noise. Just efficient violence that left the driver unconscious on the ground. Kozlov froze. Looked around at the trap he'd walked into, saw Adrian and Alara approaching. I should have known, he said in English. You're like disease, impossible to kill. You should have taken the deal, Adrian replied. You should have disappeared. Instead, you're attacking our operations and proving you can't be trusted to stay gone. So you came to finish it. How noble. No. How necessary. Kozlov looked at Alara. This is your doing. You turned him soft, made him think twice. The Adrian Volkov I researched would have killed me in Prague, but you made him hesitate. I made him strategic, Alara corrected. I thought you might be redeemable. I was wrong. You're always wrong about people. You think everyone can be managed, contained, reformed, but some of us are just broken. Some of us would rather burn everything down than admit defeat. I'm beginning to understand that. Kozlov smiled, a bitter, broken expression. So what now? You shoot me here? Make it look like an accident? Or do you drag me to another black site and torture information out of me that I don't have? We don't torture, Alara said. That's not how we operate. Then how do you operate? Because from where I'm standing, you look like killers pretending to be heroes. Adrian felt Alara tense beside him, felt her struggling with that accusation because it hit too close to something she'd been wrestling with. We're not heroes, Adrian said. We never claimed to be. We're just people trying to build something stable in a world that wants chaos. You're the chaos. That's why you have to go. Then do it. Stop talking and do it. Adrian pulled his weapon, aimed at Kozlov's chest. This should have been easy. He'd killed people for less provocation. for smaller threats, for simply being in the way. But he hesitated, not because he felt mercy, because he felt Alara beside him, watching, judging herself by what happened next. "Alara," he said quietly, "you don't have to watch this." "Yes, I do. If we're doing this because of my operations, because of my decisions, then I need to own it. That's not stop protecting me. If this is who we are, then I need to see it clearly." Adrian looked at Kozlov, at the man who'd threatened everything they'd built, who'd proven he couldn't be reasoned with or contained or trusted, who would keep coming until someone ended him. He squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the empty rest stop. Kozlov fell, dead before he hit the ground. Clean, final, necessary. Adrian lowered his weapon and looked at Alara. Her face was pale but controlled. No tears, no visible emotion. Just that same controlled distance she applied to everything. "Are you okay?" he asked. "No, but I will be." Klaus's team was already moving, securing the scene, ensuring there was no evidence that would trace back to them. The driver would wake up in a few hours with no memory of what happened. Kozlov would be discovered by the next traveler who stopped here. It would look like a targeted assassination by unknown parties. Police would investigate. They'd find nothing useful. Adrian and Alara got back in the SUV. Klaus started driving before anyone could speak. Mikhail was on the phone, coordinating cleanup and ensuring their people in Prague held their positions now that the coordinated attack would lose its leadership. They drove in silence for 20 minutes. Then Alara spoke, her voice quiet. "I feel like I should feel worse about this." "Do you feel bad about it?" Adrian asked. "I feel sad. Sad that it was necessary. Sad that someone chose revenge over survival. Sad that the world is broken enough that people like us have to do things like this. But I don't feel guilty. I don't feel like we did something wrong. Does that make me a monster? It makes you realistic. Or it makes me exactly what Kozlov said, a killer pretending to be a hero. You're not pretending anything. You've never claimed to be a hero. You've always been clear about what you do and why you do it. This doesn't change that." Alara leaned against him. "It changes me, though. Now I know I'm capable of killing when I think it's necessary. I can't unknow that." "No, you can't. But capability isn't the same as eagerness. You'll never be like me, someone who uses violence as a first option. You'll always look for other solutions first. That's what makes you different. What if I start seeing violence as easier? What if I become someone who justifies killing because it's more efficient than prevention?" "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're asking the question. People who become monsters stop caring whether they're monsters. You still care. That matters." They reached the city by evening. The mansion felt different somehow, less like a fortress and more like just a building. Adrian realized he'd spent so many years making it impenetrable that he'd forgotten it was supposed to be a home. Alara went to her office immediately. Had calls to make, operations to manage, crises that hadn't stopped just because they'd been dealing with Kozlov. Adrian handled his own business, checked on Prague, confirmed the territory was secure, made sure Mikhail knew to show strength but not cruelty in maintaining their position. They found each other again around midnight, both exhausted, both carrying the weight of what they'd done. "I need to tell you something," Alara said. Adrian looked up from the reports he'd been reviewing. "When I destroyed Kozlov's network 3 years ago, I knew it might come back to haunt me. I knew he was the type who'd seek revenge, but I did it anyway because his operations were causing too much damage. And I never told you because I didn't want you implicated in the consequences of my choices. You were protecting me. I was maintaining operational security, or at least that's what I told myself. But really, I was keeping you at a distance because distance felt safer. And now? Now I realize that distance isn't safety. It's just loneliness with a better justification." Alara sat beside him. "I don't know how to be close to people. I don't know how to build something personal instead of strategic, but I want to learn. If you're willing to be patient with someone who's going to be terrible at this." Adrian set aside his reports. "I've spent 20 years being patient with myself for being terrible at being human. I can be patient with you too. What does that look like? Patience between two people who are both damaged and dangerous and barely functional at normal relationships?" "I have no idea. But probably it looks like this. sitting together at midnight, admitting we don't know what we're doing, and agreeing to figure it out anyway. Alara was quiet for a moment. Then, I want to change something about how we live. What? The Meridian Initiative. I've been running it as a solo operation for years, making all decisions myself, carrying all the weight alone. But today made me realize that's not sustainable. I need help, real help. Not just operatives following orders, but partners who can make decisions when I'm not available. You want to delegate. I want to build something that doesn't require me to be everywhere at once, something that can function even if I'm not controlling every detail. That's going to be hard for you, giving up control. Everything worthwhile is hard, but I'm tired, Adrian. I'm tired of carrying the weight of trying to save the world by myself. And I realized today that if something happened to me, if Kozlov had succeeded in killing me, all that work would just collapse. That's not stability. That's fragility masquerading as strength. So, what's your plan? I promote Carrington to actual leadership instead of just coordination. I recruit 3 more people I trust to handle regional operations independently. I build systems that don't require my constant intervention. And I accept that this means some decisions will be made that I wouldn't have made. That some operations will fail that I might have saved. That's a lot of trust to place in other people. Yes, it terrifies me. But I'm learning from someone who built an empire by trusting his lieutenants with significant autonomy. Your organization functions because you delegate to people like Mikhail. I need to do the same. Adrian took her hand. This is because you want more time for us. This is because I want more time for life, which includes us, which includes sleeping more than 4 hours a night, which includes existing as something other than a crisis management system with a human face. I like this plan. I might fail at it. I might micromanage anyway. I might panic the first time something goes wrong that I wasn't directly controlling. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But at least you're trying. Alara leaned her head on his shoulder. What about you? Are you changing anything about how you operate? Adrian thought about that. I'm going to start asking whether violence is necessary before defaulting to it as a solution. I'm going to consider consequences beyond immediate tactical advantage. And I'm going to stop bringing other women to galas as accessories. That last one seems obvious. You'd think. But I've been doing it for 20 years. Old habits die hard. Try harder. Yes, ma'am. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, people living their lives, unaware that 2 dangerous people in a mansion on the hill had just decided to try being slightly less dangerous. When this gets hard, Alara said quietly, when we have fights about my travel schedule or your business decisions or the 1,000 other things couples fight about, remind me that we chose this, that we decided trying and failing was better than not trying at all. Same to you. When I'm being impossible about wanting you to stay home instead of managing crises and war zones, remind me that I knew who you were when I signed up for this. Deal. Over the next 6 months, they learned what trying actually meant. It meant arguments at 2 a.m. about whether Alara really needed to fly to Somalia or whether someone else could handle it. It meant Adrian learning to tell her about operations that might get him killed instead of just handling them alone. It meant compromise, which neither of them was good at, and patience, which both of them had to learn. It meant Alara slowly, painfully delegating authority to Carrington and the new regional directors she recruited. It meant watching operations fail that she might have saved and learning that failure wasn't the end of the world. It meant Adrian scaling back his territory and focusing on legitimate businesses that made money without requiring violence. It meant both of them discovering that letting go of control didn't mean losing everything. Sometimes it meant building something stronger. 6 months after Prague, they attended another gala. The Continental, same as before. But this time, Alara was on Adrian's arm from the start. No separate arrivals, no distance. They walked in together, and the room noticed. Mr. Volkov, Ms. Sorel, what a lovely surprise to see you both. We thought it was time, Alara said simply. The evening was different from that first night. Adrian didn't spend it performing power. Alara didn't spend it managing crises. They simply existed in the space together, talking to people who mattered and ignoring people who didn't. At one point, Senator Hutchins approached. Ms. Sorrell, I wanted to thank you. The Eastern European situation you advised on has stabilized remarkably. I had help this time, Ilara said, gesturing to Adrian. Turns out combining different kinds of expertise produces better outcomes. And Mr. Volkov, another voice added, Margaret Ashford from British Parliament. I hear your organization has shifted focus toward legitimate operations. Quite the transformation. I'm trying something new, Adrian said. Turns out there are ways to build power that don't require constantly looking over your shoulder. They stayed until midnight, then left together. In the car heading home, Ilara looked thoughtful. That was easier than I expected. What was? Being public about us. I spent 3 years being invisible at these events. It felt strange to be seen. How did it feel? Strange good or strange bad? Strange real, like we're actually building something instead of just performing for our respective audiences. We are building something. What exactly are we building, Adrian? We're not a normal couple. We don't do normal couple things. We run empires and prevent wars and kill people when necessary. What do you call that? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's ours. That's enough for me. Ilara smiled, and this time it was full and genuine, the kind of smile she'd probably forgotten she was capable of. It's enough for me, too. A year after that first gala where Adrian had discovered who his wife actually was, Ilara surprised him with something he'd never expected. She announced she was stepping back from active leadership of the Meridian Initiative. Not retiring, she'd never fully retire, but transitioning to advisory role. Carrington would take over day-to-day operations. The regional directors she'd trained would handle their territories independently. Why now? Adrian asked when she told him. Because I realized something. I've spent 15 years trying to save the world, and I have saved parts of it. I've prevented wars. I've saved lives. I've built systems that create stability in unstable places. But I've also sacrificed everything personal for that work. And I'm starting to understand that you can't build a sustainable future by destroying your present. You're not destroying anything. I was destroying myself. Slowly. By never resting. Never connecting. Never allowing myself to be human instead of just useful. I need to stop before there's nothing left of me except the work. What will you do instead? Still work with the initiative. Still advise. Still handle crises when my specific expertise is needed. But I'm also going to sleep full nights. Travel for pleasure instead of just necessity. Learn to exist in a relationship instead of just maintaining a strategic partnership. That sounds like a lot of change. It terrifies me, but I'm learning that terror means I'm doing something important. Adrian pulled her close. I'm proud of you. For what? For choosing yourself. For deciding that you matter as much as the people you save. I learned that from you. You've spent this year scaling back operations that were more about ego than necessity. You've proven that empire can be maintained without constant expansion. You've shown me that sometimes less is more. So we're both learning to be human. We're both trying. That's probably the best we can hope for. They stood together on the balcony of their home, no longer divided into his wing and her wing, but shared space they'd gradually filled with evidence of life lived together. Books from places they'd traveled, art they'd chosen together, evidence of compromise and connection. The city spread out below them. Adrian's empire, smaller now but more legitimate. Ilara's network, more distributed but more sustainable. Two people who'd built their identities around power, learning that sometimes the greatest power was choosing not to use it. What do you think happens next? Ilara asked. I don't know. More crises, probably. More problems that need solving. More arguments about whether you really need to fly to Jakarta or whether I really need to meet with Moscow contacts. That sounds exhausting. It sounds like life. Real life, not just crisis management and empire building. I think I like real life. Even though it's messy and complicated and doesn't follow strategic plans. Especially because of that. Strategic plans are predictable. This is something else entirely. Adrian looked at the woman beside him, the invisible wife who'd turned out to be more powerful than anyone he'd ever met. The person who'd taught him that strength came in forms he'd never recognized. The partner who'd shown him that vulnerability wasn't weakness if it was shared with someone who respected it. I love you, he said. Simple words that carried weight neither of them had expected to feel. Ilara turned to look at him. I love you too. even though I'm still not entirely sure what that means in practical terms. It means we keep trying, keep learning, keep choosing each other even when it's difficult. I can do that. I'm good at difficult things. So am I. We'll be good at this too. They stood together as evening settled over the city, two people who'd found each other by accident and stayed together by choice. They'd never be normal, never be simple. But they were building something that worked for them, a partnership forged from danger and maintained through effort, a love that didn't fix them but made being broken slightly more bearable. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.